All right, I think we're all here, so let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 5:01 p.m. on September 22nd. My name is Sean Eystone. We have quite a few people on the call here. We have the directors JP Clausen, Charlie Easton, Janet Godwin, Ruthina Malone, and Luke Williams, and soon-to-be director Dromi Etsy in about 30 seconds here. Superintendent Matt Degner, Recording Secretary Kim Colvin, and a whole lot of other folks, smiling faces I see. My weekly reminder that we won't be answering questions in real time from the Q&A or the chat section, but we kind of make note of those questions and try and get to them later. But we will have an opportunity for community comment tonight in the meeting. Before we get to that, we have a couple of other things to do, so we'll get right into it. We get the fun part of administering an oath of office to our new member. So I think I'm handing that part off to Janet Graft, I believe.
Good evening. Dromi Etsy, do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the office of board member in the Iowa City Community School District as now or hereafter required by law?
I do.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. We can all clap for that.
Hey, congratulations.
Welcome. And we are once again 7. It's so fulfilling.
Thank you.
I didn't look, I probably should have done this earlier, but first up we have our student representatives, and I meant to kind of get a heads up to see if they were all here or not. Kim's nodding, so hopefully that's good. I'm going to do them that they're in the order on the agenda. So first up from Liberty High is Elizabeth Wagner. So, all right.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Wagner, and I'm a senior at Liberty. One of the biggest things we have done in the past couple months is a virtual new student orientation. This orientation was led by our Liberty NHS chapter. Students that are new to Liberty, whether that be a freshman or new to the district sophomores, juniors, and seniors, can visit a page on the Liberty website that is dedicated to orientation. This page includes videos made by NHS members on how to get acquainted with online school, how best to succeed in academics, and what it means to be a bull, just to name a few. New students were also put into groups and assigned a lightning leader. The lightning leader sent out an email during the first week of school that included a video introducing themselves. On top of all this, NHS members made videos that describe and demonstrate the letters of our PBIS Bolts matrix. These videos will be shared and talked about during homeroom. Next, Liberty is offering new students the opportunity to get into the building before the first day of hybrid learning, so they can learn the layout of the school. Before the district was granted the waiver to start online, many students had voiced concerns over not being able to walk through their schedules as they had in years past, whether that be with our new student orientation or registration. Because of these concerns, our admin decided they wanted to have a day where students could sign up for a school tour in small groups. This day was postponed due to starting online, and it has been rescheduled for Thursday, September 24th and Saturday, September 26th from 9 a.m. to noon. This will be led by Liberty NHS members. Also happening this week are a couple of webinars hosted by Liberty admin. On Thursday, September 24th at 7:30 p.m., there will be a webinar for families that will focus on the transition to hybrid learning. The other webinar will be offered to all students in standard enrollment during homeroom on Friday, September 25th. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Next up from City High, Catherine Gertis.
Hi, so I'm Catherine Gertis. I'm a senior at City High. So I just wanted to first talk about like the community building things that we're doing at City High. So every Friday, Mr. Bacon hosts an advisory meeting with the whole school just to try and build community at City High. We had a teacher TikTok contest, which I think a lot of the students enjoyed. And then we're also, obviously sports aren't happening right now, but I think all of them are finding resourceful ways to still, you know, productively spend their time practicing. Show choir was practicing in the parking lot. I know that the cross-country teams are doing different things to try and, you know, still be safe, but still practice, at least before we went completely online. And then I also wanted to thank you guys for all the work that you're doing still with the additions at City High, and I think those are looking really well, even though I haven't been to City High in a while, but I'm excited for the surprise when we go back. We also are going to have the orientation like Liberty High is having, where students tour the school a day before the first day of hybrid learning. And then online school is going really well. I think a lot of the teachers are getting used to it, but all of my classes have been going well. My little brother is having fun in his first year of high school, but I think online learning is still working out super well for him. I did have a few questions for the school board. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask those right now, or I should wait for a different section of the meeting.
You're welcome to ask your questions, but we won't be able to answer them at this moment in time.
Oh, okay.
Back to you.
So I'll just give them, and then if you guys want to answer them later, I'll be happy to write the answers down. So just a few of my peers were wondering what the sickness policy would be for online school. And then another question was, at the end of the try, when students might move from online learning to hybrid learning, how the teachers would switch around at the end of the try and how you guys are planning to do that. And then that's just, I think, 2 questions that some students had from City High. So yeah, thanks so much. But otherwise, I think everything is going really well. And we're excited to go to hybrid learning by the end of the month.
All right, very good. Those are good questions, Catherine. We'll probably get some answers to you at some point here. All right, next up from West High, Paras Basuk. I saw him on there. I don't know about Aditi Borda.
Yeah, it's just me here today.
Paras.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paras Vasuk. I'm the co-school board representative from our student senate at West High. West High, despite our busy and unusual start to the year, has had very many successes. And earlier this month, it was announced that 30 West High School students have been honored as National Merit Semifinalists, which is a number that breaks state records and is leading the state this year. West High has also worked at the start of the year with various colleges and universities to organize virtual campus tours and college visits for interested students. And we also held our college and career fair this past weekend. Many of our clubs have begun their recruitment cycle in the fall, with Theater West announcing its 2020 audition dates for some virtual theater that they're planning this month, and the start of clubs like BPA, our 1440 Interact Club, and our music performance club called Cadenza. This year, all homecoming activities have been postponed, as well as obviously our athletic stuff has been put on hold for a little bit, but our athletes are still having successes. Just this last week, Aurora Roger and Jordan Christensen were selected as Swimming Scholastic All-Americans. As our hybrid students get ready to return to school next week and our online teachers and students settle into this new school routine, we're really looking forward to all that we can learn. This has been a remarkable and memorable start to the year, and all our West students and teachers have been able to make the most out of what is available. Thank you all so much for having me today.
Thanks, Paras. From Tate, we do have a representative, Kristen Platt. I didn't see that name on the list.
Either. I don't see her either, Sean.
Okay. So we will get Kristen the next time, hopefully. We will go ahead and move into community comments. So if any attendees would like to make comments, they need to use the raise hand feature, and I will call on you and Kim will grant you rights, and you will have 4 minutes to speak. And we can do that now. We have one so far, Robert Roger. Kim? Robert, if you are ready to speak, you need to unmute and then you can have your 4 minutes. All right. Well, the hand came down, so I'm not sure if that means he's not wanting to speak. So let's go ahead and move on. And Robert, if you would like to speak, we'll have you put your hand back up. So Kim, let's move on to Christina P.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great, thank you. So my question tonight is about the YouTube applications on the Chromebooks. I have a high school student, but I also have a 6-year-old who's in 1st grade. And he was supposed to be doing math, and he got on and he was watching YouTube, and he doesn't even know how to get on Zoom. I said, how did you get on YouTube? Oh, there's an app at the bottom of the screen. So I pulled it up and I had him leave the room, and I started searching, and I could search for anything. I found violent content, autopsies, pornographic content, and more. Extremist content, right-wing content. And when I go to it, it says, oh, this is restricted. Would you still like to proceed? And then you just hit a button that says, yes, proceed. And you go forward and you can watch the videos. Now, I went ahead and emailed Adam Kurth, who sent me information that there was a safe option for the school district, which they decided not to use because the school district, for some reason, considers YouTube essential for teaching. And then he said there's a separate app where I would need to go to a mobile device, and then I would need to download it. It's called Securely. And then I would need to enter my son's information. And then I would need to go and I would change the settings from the default to safer settings. Now, my question is, why aren't the settings set to safe? And then if parents want to go in and change it to be more permissive, that seems more acceptable to me. Secondly, I do not think that YouTube is absolutely necessary for teaching. And so I think that the safe option would have been better. And finally, parents were not warned about this. We do not know that our 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds have YouTube apps on their computers. And we do not know that you can watch any video you want with absolutely disgusting things. And I will tell you that I work over 40 hours a week. My son has to go to daycare just to do class online, and there are older kids there. And at some point, they're going to search something inappropriate that they think is funny, like butts, and porn is going to come up, and that's disgusting. And I would like a response to why we cannot set the defaults to safe, especially for elementary age children. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Next up, looks like some guy named Paul Ressler.
Hello, everybody, and hopefully you can all hear me. It's odd being on the other side of the screen because I can't see myself talking. I just wanted to welcome the newest school board member, Drami, and Ruthina was talking to me the other day and said that you had big shoes to fill, but I didn't really know what that meant. But I think you're going to be great. Enjoy the work that you are going to take on here, and don't let anybody get to you. Just have fun with it and do what's always best for the kids and the students in the district. And then secondly, I just wanted to say that as I've now joined the other side in the teaching world, I really appreciate all the work that's been put in by the district and the teachers, even more so now than I did when I was a board member. I knew it was a big undertaking then, and I now realize it was an even bigger undertaking, and they've done a great job. I would just caution the parents to be patient with teachers and with the curriculum, and know that everyone is doing their best to kind of make do for what we can, and we're learning right along with you. And as we transition some students back into hybrid, there'll be even more challenges there that I'm sure everyone will overcome. So just a shout out to the staff that's done all the work this summer to put this together, and know that I appreciate it as a board member, and I appreciate it even more now as a teacher, as I've been teaching online for almost 3 weeks now, and really looking forward to the students coming back. And could not have done that without the work that was already put in this summer. So just hats off to the district there, and welcome, Drami. Enjoy your time on the board.
All right, thanks, Paul. I very much appreciate your time on the board and now as a teacher as well. I know you're doing great work there. All right, Kim, next up, Jennifer Banta.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Banta, and I am a parent of a City High sophomore, but I'm speaking to you today from my role as the Vice President at the Iowa City Area Business Partnership.
Hey, Jennifer, you're very, very faint.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yes, that's a little bit better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. So I'm going to be speaking to you today from my role as the Vice President at the Iowa City Area Business Partnership. As you know, the interruptions caused by COVID have been universal. We're seeing the intricate web that holds our community together like never before. We've always known that school is foundational to the success of our children, but now we're also seeing that school is foundational to the success of our business community as well. With school moving online, either full-time or part-time, we've seen both parents and employers scrambling to make the necessary adjustments. Families are making really hard decisions about which model works best for them. And those words are easy for me to say, but there are layers of issues involved in making that decision. What hangs in the balance now is parents continuing to provide financially for their families and getting their children the education they need while also protecting themselves and their children from COVID-19. What we've seen in the last few weeks, and really a lot longer than that, is a breakdown in the infrastructure. Not all of us are playing on a level ball field right now. Internet access, language barriers, technology literacy, the ability to work from home or not, single parenting, just to name a few things. I know we've asked a lot of our schools recently. Quite frankly, we've asked you guys to solve problems that aren't even yours to solve. I'd like to say, I see you and thank you. Thank you very much. I know how hard it's been. As a community, we have a lot of work in order to get our children the education they need to be successful, to get parents the resources they need to support their children. And finally, we need to reimagine our community so we can face the next crisis, whatever, wherever that happens to be. We need to reimagine what this infrastructure looks like and if it should include childcare and internet as a basic right. I know that these are big questions for another day, but I'll leave you with this. The business community is here to help you. Our nonprofit community is also here to help you. This invisible web that ties us all together that we're all seeing lately, it means that you have close partners with common goals. We want our students to be successful. I want to offer a big thank you to our teachers and administrators that have been working to create meaningful and rigorous classroom experiences for our students. I also want to give a big shout out to student family advocates who have been going above and beyond and are often unrecognized for their work. They have been instrumental in getting kids to school this fall. And lastly, thank you to the school board for your leadership in this dynamic situation. We're testing the bounds of our resilience and resourcefulness, but I want you to know that we're all up for the challenge and we're here to help. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Kim, I'm going to put a little pause on the community comment, and Kristen Platt is here, our student representative from Tate. If we can go back and give her a chance to give her update.
Hello. I
Welcome.
logged in with my not my legal names, like I logged in with Chris, so it just, you didn't see Kirsten there. Sorry about that. But good evening, board members. My name is Chris Platt. I'm a junior at Tate High School and look forward to representing our school at board meetings this year. Thank you for having us. After spending 2 trimesters at the old Hoover School last year during the Tate renovation, teachers and staff are happy to be back at our permanent location on Mall Drive. The building is beautiful and the extra space is exactly what we need. The students who have come to register for school and pick up classroom materials are especially excited about the new gym and workout room. We also look forward to cooking and sewing classes in our new family consumer science classroom. Everyone at Tate wishes to thank the school board for supporting this renovation and giving our students the space we need to learn and grow. About 80% of our student body will be returning in-person classes this coming Monday, September 28th. At Tate, we are able to provide the supports that our students need in a smaller, more personalized learning environment. While students have worked hard to learn in a virtual environment, many have missed the extra support and structure that we are able to provide at Tate. The entire staff is ready to welcome students back into in-person learning next week. Currently, there are 24 Tate students enrolled in the district's new online learning program. The online learning program provides flexibility for students who are not comfortable being in the building at this time, and also makes it easier for students to take courses that we don't normally offer at Tate. We are constantly monitoring the progress of these 24 students and continue to reach out to them to offer supports. Tate teachers will hold orientation for all students when we return to the building next week. Orientation provides students an explicit guide to Tate High School's expectations. Every staff member delivers the same message and the same opportunities to help students positively engage as a Tate warrior. This is vital to the effective and efficient programming we offer at Tate. This year, students will also have a chance to learn and ask questions about how we will navigate school during the time of COVID. Our goal is to ensure that students understand expectations and are comfortable working both in-person and virtual environments this year. Lastly, we would like to welcome 3 new staff members to Tate: Michelle Curry in English, Michael McDonald in Special Ed, and Danielle Riney in Math. These teachers bring with them several years of experience and proven dedication to providing education in a joyful, supportive environment. We are happy to welcome them to Tate. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And we'll look for Chris on the login next time, just to make sure we get you. I thought it might've been you. I should have just asked. So we'll go back to community comment. Next up is Lisa Petrie.
Hi, this is Lisa. I was just asking if you could let Chris Platt in. I was helping her present tonight, as this was her first time. And thanks so much for letting her in. So we're all good here.
All right, thanks, Lisa.
Yep.
All right, then we have Sherry Urkel is up, Kim.
Hi, I have a question that's related to some of the other community comments about internet access and the hybrid and online. I just have a few questions. Wondering how many students started the year without internet, how many students are still without internet, and then what plans does the district have to help families while in the hybrid model, specifically targeting students who don't have internet or have been having trouble or without internet? And is the district planning on providing parents training on technology that their students are expected to use? And is it going to be available and accessible in all languages? And how this information is being communicated to families, since not all families have an email address. I only have experience helping and advocating for one family whose first language is not English, and the mother did not have email, did not know how to connect the technology. Her children were, it was day 9 before they got connected and started school. She has a preschooler and a 2nd grader. I was in contact several times with family advocates and principal, school secretary finally helped us get connected, but I know that that's just one example among many, and I feel like we can do better for the students who, even when they go back to the hybrid model, they'll have a couple days at home and they need more support. And so, one, wondering what the statistics are and how we're going to improve that outreach. And secondly, what can community members that can help, what can we do to help? Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sherry, appreciate it. That is our last raised hand, so we will go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, which is the agenda approval. So I'd entertain a motion for that.
I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
All right, Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, very good. See, Drum, it's easy. You got your first vote out of the way.
Hey.
All right, we're gonna move into consent agenda. I know I had one question on the bills that was asked and answered, but if I can find the answer, if I can pull it up here, I'd throw it out there just for public consumption. There was an item in there that was just described as COVID-19 facility response, and I wanted a little more detail on that. And it was a contract to inspect the ventilation systems in all the buildings to make sure they were operating properly, which is a pretty important thing in this day and age. And I know, I believe it was Director Malone had a couple questions as well that were asked and answered. Let Ruthina, if you want to talk about it, you're welcome to.
And it was one for Ear Trumpet LLC. I figured it was related to music, and it was for Liberty Orchestra. And then the other was for COVID plexiglass shields from GM Instruments. And I just wanted to know where those plexiglass shields were going, and found out that they'll be installed where district staff meets with public, and that's generally like front office spaces. So thank you for getting me those answers.
And did any other directors have any additional questions on the bills? All right, are there any items from the consent agenda that directors would like to pull?
I would like to pull item 8.
All right. Anyone else? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we approve consent agenda minus item 8, the core diploma.
Second. All right, Kim, I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, so we will take a look at item number 8. Dromi, did you have specific questions on it, or more, just want more information?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily have any questions. I would just like the administrative team to highlight the significance of this to the English language learners.
Great, Sean, you okay with me jumping in? All right, so super, and so thank you for pulling that one, Dromi. I think this is a really neat piece that we have moving forward, echoing some of our commitment to our diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, and some significant steps we're taking for our English language learners. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura Daly to talk a little bit about the core diploma, kind of the work behind it, and then what it represents.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks so much for highlighting that, and welcome to the board, Dromi too. And so thanks for acknowledging the importance of this core diploma. It is really for, you know, as it spells out in the materials, but in very limited situations for English learners who sometimes we refer to them as SLIFE, the students with limited or interrupted formal education. And they come to us and are in, you know, our educational system really at about the point that they would age out, and it would be just essentially impossible to obtain the credits and take all the required courses that would be needed to get to that, you know, credit requirement. And this just gives a great option for them to be able to obtain a diploma and to, you know, seek other career and educational opportunities afterwards. And, you know, the credit really goes to our ELL. We've got just a great team of ELL teachers, almost 70 ELL teachers in our district now. And Kimberly Grage, our ELL assessment specialist, and Sheila Niels, who is our ELL coordinator, and the two of them last spring began to just think of ways that we needed to think differently and differentiate some of our supports for our English learners. And this was one way to be able to really recognize and honor the different life experiences that some of our English learners come to us with, and to give them a tool really to be able to move past this high school experience that they will have, and move on from there. And we started this conversation actually pre-pandemic. This was before all of this happened, and Matt, in his former role, we were discussing that with him at that time, and then just through the course of the spring and over the summer, brought Diane and Scott Kibbe into the conversation, and that's why we're bringing it to you for your approval tonight and for implementation. And so I think it's important to know it's not just because of the current learning environment that we're in. We had recognized that prior to, like I said, the pandemic occurring also. And so we pulled a group of high school counselors together, kind of talked it through, and just really kind of vetted the process. And again, it's in limited situations. Ultimately there goes through a couple different approval processes, but it is for the benefit of our English learners that it's going to put them on a pathway to, hopefully more success as they move on past that high school experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that more in-depth description of it as well. If there's no further discussion on it, I would entertain a motion.
I'd move approval of agenda item, this is what, 8? Or consent agenda item 8, sorry.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, we can move down into our discussion items. We have a handful, but the first one's the big one. So return to learn update. Matt, take it away.
Need to unmute myself there. So thanks everybody. Good evening. Yes, we're looking forward to talking a little bit about return to learn here with you this evening. And really, I think the focus of our talk tonight will be kind of like a first day of school with the return to in-person instruction on Monday, which we're excited about in beginning our hybrid component. And so I'm going to turn it to Amy and Chase, and Amy's going to talk a little bit about some of our the hybrid schedules, bring those back in front of you, and the offsite days and the academic protocols, and then that AB calendar, how we'll be working through that, and the day we'll start on, and where we'll be at in that calendar as we begin the in-person instruction component. And then Chase will talk through, like I said, some of the operational components around the health and safety mitigation efforts, and then some of our usual updates around transportation, meals, technology, and then also finish up on employee leave and how we're handling some of those requests. So with that, I'll let Amy jump in and go from here.
Thanks, Matt. Good evening, everyone. As Matt said, we're excited about what we're calling our first day of school, and we're thrilled to welcome students back to campus. We haven't had students on campus, of course, since March in this capacity, so we're thrilled about that. And this week, and as well as towards the end of last week, we started preparing our admins again about thinking about the hybrid model. All of our focus and attention turned right towards 100% of us starting the year offline. So we've had a heavy concentration on that, of course, this week and at the tail end of last week. Just real quickly though, I just want to give a shout out to our elementary staff members for their preparation for our second student item pickup day that's gone on throughout the course of the day and still going on right now. And that, this pickup has been for our students that will continue in the online learning program. Tonight, I just want to share a few things around the calendar and schedules, and then some of the differences. So with our calendar, it's our first time that we'll be pivoting to our A-B hybrid rotation. And this is where our students are involved in face-to-face instruction 50% of the time over a 2-week period. And how the calendar happens to fall out is next week, our schedules will include A days on Monday and Tuesday, and B days on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We were quick to point that out in last Friday's communication to our families and staff, and we'll continue to reiterate that again this week with future communication. Schedules come to mind as we enter into the hybrid model, and for our on-site students, schedules are largely reminiscent of what we've experienced in the past. So our elementary students and their curriculum time allotments that the elementary teachers adhere to and they use to build their individual grade level schedules. And in our secondary schools with their 7 and 8 hour periods respectively. And then in our offsite days, we've got that outlined at the elementary level. Our offsite days our students will still be accessing their Seesaw accounts that they've grown accustomed to, hopefully in these last 2.5 weeks here. They'll operate off of a suggested schedule as well. Their assignments will be posted there. They will have a synchronous Zoom morning meeting, again, like they've been accustomed to. And then we will offer a touch point for English language arts and mathematics with a certified teacher. At the secondary level, those offsite days are largely asynchronous. And then when we think about academic protocols, because we need to be thinking about that as we move students onto campus, we know that there'll be times where students might have to be at home either because they've are afflicted with COVID or they've come in close contact. And that contact tracing will begin, of course, next week as well. So we've outlined for our teachers and for our parents in that comprehensive return to learn guide what happens during those days. Because that is, going to be longer for our students than the typical 1 or 2 days that they might have been home in the past with an illness. When we think about the differences then, so while our schedules while we're face-to-face will look reminiscent on the past, our campuses won't. And that's because 55% of our families and students selected into the standard enrollment option, which means that our students in this model could be in any of the learning models that as a district we're involved in at the time. So of course we'll be coming out of the 100% offsite model, we'll be moving into the hybrid model, and they could also move into the 100% face-to-face model if conditions warrant. So when you think about that 55%, roughly half then, of course, of those students will be on campus daily. So we're talking about a significant reduction in the number of students on campus. And then second to that, of course, is not second to that, but important along with that is our health and safety mitigations that we'll have in place. And it's at this time that I'll turn it over to Chase to share more about that.
Great, thanks, Amy. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be with you on this Tuesday, late afternoon, early evening. We have a few things from the ops side that we're going to cover. As Amy mentioned, I'm going to start, and Matt did as well, I'm going to start talking about health and safety and a little bit about transportation, and I'm going to turn over the team to talk about a couple more of those pieces, finishing up with Nick and Jeremy to provide a short presentation, kind of answering some of the questions that came up last week. But first things first, Amy talked about some of the health and safety measures that we have in place in our buildings. And it's been a while since we've had this in front of the board, but this is just a reminder that our Return to Learn guide is on the website, and specifically pages 14 through 21. I scrolled through and I was at the bottom of the section, so I apologize. So we're going to scroll up. I'm not going to go over all of them, but they go through some of these these mitigation techniques for health and safety, but the secondary level, at the elementary level, and then also across the entire district. We published this through email and our updates, as well as put it on our webpage back in the middle of August, when we thought that our first day of school was going to be in the hybrid model. And then with the change to the online, We've kind of moved away from that a little bit, but now, as Matt said earlier, our second first day of school being next week and the return to the hybrid model, we thought it was important to point this out again, that these are still in place. Simply because we went online for 2 weeks didn't mean that we're abandoning these. They're still there for our families to see. And so we'll be utilizing these as we move into the hybrid in our buildings next week. We've also put out some additional guidance to our staff, more details around some of the areas about in their classrooms, in the hallways, and things of that nature, so that they have that guidance as well. And so we've been working with our buildings and our staff on some of those pieces as we look to welcome students back next week, which we're very excited about. The other thing that I'd like to talk about real quick is that for the first time this year, we're going to offer transportation across the district, which that's exciting for our colleagues and our transportation teams. And so starting Monday, 77 scheduled routes will transport our students to schools across the district. Just like the school day, it's set up into A and B days. Letters went out to families yesterday about where the days they're assigned, where their bus route is, their pickup and drop off times, like we do every year. The thing that's different, right, is that kids are only going to ride the bus on the days that they go to school. We will run the routes every day simply because how we've divided the students by A and B. So the routes we run every day, but of course the students will be divided between their A days and their B days. And so that's a quick update on transportation, and I'll turn it over to Allison to talk about food, meals.
Thank you, Chase. Good evening. So back on September 4th, we received word from the USDA that free meal program that we've been enjoying since middle of March would be extended through the end of December. And that is quite extraordinary. It's a great opportunity for our students, and it will provide free meals for all kids, regardless of whether they're in the building or grabbing meals at the curb. So that's a great opportunity that we will be continuing. So we've been utilizing that program since following spring break, and we served nearly 494,000 meals through that program. So we will be continuing that. So since September 8th, we have been continuing the grab and go meals at the curb at 7 locations. We're averaging about 4,500 to 5,000 meals a day with that program. As we return to the hybrid next week, we will continue to offer meals at the schools like we always have. I guess it's been a while, but since we'll return to that same model that we were in before we went online. And all those meals will be free. So students will have to pay for a la carte items, but they can all have a meal for free. And at the same time, then we will continue those grab and go meals at the curb at those 7 locations every day from noon to 1. So we are again excited about this opportunity to provide these free meals for students. That is through the end of December at this point, and we are still encouraging families to fill out their free and reduced applications because we don't want to see any family lose benefits then starting again in January.
Thanks, Allison. And so we'll go through all the updates, and we'll come back and obviously answer any questions the board has at the end. But I'll turn it over to Adam for a tech update.
All right, I will start with the internet and then talk a little bit about tech support, similar format to last week. As a district, we've received 1,124 requests for home internet, including 321 in the past 2 weeks. We've connected 650 homes to internet with direct to home internet connections, and have distributed 414 hotspots at this point. We're still working currently to distribute 60 additional hotspots for recent requests. That will take us right down to, I'm lagging a bit, so I'm gonna stop my video. Sorry about that. But I hear that, and sorry, I lost my spot here. That'll take us right down to the end of our hotspot inventory. Hopefully I'm coming across here okay. And we do have more devices that we've ordered. We had ordered those last week and are awaiting delivery of those. I had some questions last week that I didn't have answers to, so we did some testing. And all of the hotspots we're distributing can connect multiple devices at once. So that's something that we are able to provide. However, strength of cellular signal in any particular spot might be a limiting factor. They are 4G hotspots, but that doesn't guarantee a certain location. Because of that, as I mentioned, we continue to work to connect all homes wherever possible to direct home internet as our primary method of connection. Also had some questions last week about hotspots hitting their monthly caps, their limits for bandwidth consumption, and pulled reports on that. We do not have the ability to report on Sprint devices. Sprint devices are through the Sprint grant program. They're a minority of our hotspots that we've deployed. But of our 373 Khajiit hotspots that we do have visibility into, none have hit their monthly limit since the start of the school year. The limit is 25 gigabytes. Average monthly consumption for active hotspots has been 2.4 gigabytes since the start of the school year, so about 10% of that monthly limit. Also seeing some data that's encouraging and maybe speaks to a question that was asked earlier in this meeting. Last week, student engagement statistics provided by each school showed 91 reported students who were being prevented from participation in classes by internet-related problems. This week, that number's dropped to 21. So some progress there. Questions about internet access provision? All right, I will jump to support requests. This is one that we've put a lot of attention towards in the last, really the last few weeks, but especially the last week. So far, our help desk has received over 14,000 emails, 6,000 support requests in the past 2 weeks. For context, that's a six-fold increase compared to the first 2 weeks of last school year and represents 37% of our total request volume from last year. The complexity of addressing internal home-based and ISP-related tickets is far greater than what we normally experience in our internal support environment. We've turned our support so that we're now both internal and external facing. With all of that said, we are currently at 849 open support requests as of this morning. That's likely lower at this point, down from 1,400 last week. We've seen that number consistently drop by about 100 per day in terms of our open tickets. We receive about 350 requests per day and have been for the last 8 business days. And we resolve close to 500 per day. Increasing our daily throughput, I mentioned this last week, through the addition of temporary help desk staff. Those staff have started. There's a little bit of onboarding there, so there's a period of ramp up, but we have seen substantial benefit. It's been offset a little bit temporarily by reallocation of staff to work on preparation of classroom technology prior to resumption of on-site learning as we move into the return to in-person learning. All classrooms, as it relates to that, all classrooms that still required integrated technology following conclusion of construction this summer will be ready by the end of the week. We've been troubleshooting reported issues with Chromebooks and Zoom. This was something we discussed last week as well. We've tried to dive into those on a case-by-case basis and really figure out what's going on. We don't believe that there's a fundamental issue with Zoom on Chromebooks. We can't replicate it universally, and other districts, other schools, and even our own classrooms, we're not seeing that. In most cases, it's working well, but we're working through reported cases to identify the root causes, which can be a teacher's internet connection, a student's internet connection, the logistics of Wi-Fi in a student or teacher's home, specific hardware issues with an individual's computer. There are a lot of potential causes there. We've even started to see some issues where we're able to isolate problems to students who are all at the same daycare center using the Wi-Fi at the daycare center, and that's probably our bottleneck point. So really, there isn't a single universal solution to that. We've just had to dive into those cases as they arrive and really try to identify and address the root causes of each of those cases we have reported to us. Happy to address any questions.
Adam, I just had a question. I know you talked about it some last week, but I'm wondering if you can reiterate or explain how information is going out to staff, knowing that Zoom is instituting some changes with security measures, that you either have to use an authenticated login, so the students would have to connect using their ICCSD email account, or that the person hosting the Zoom meeting would have to utilize a waiting room, which I know sometimes can be difficult for teachers who's trying to teach and maybe sharing their screen. They can't always see kids coming in.
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's something that we were able to get past an age restriction that was blocking us from requiring authenticated users last week. We have a solution in place. I know that that's been pretty heavily tested here, and kudos to Greg Schultz, who's really been working through that process with teachers and students to make sure that our instructions are solid and consistent. But ultimately, you know, we have concern about security of those meetings. If we can't require that individuals joining them be joining through a district account, then we really have no firm way to know that we have the right people entering those meetings. And it requires us to put measures in place like the waiting room, for instance, where we have to, you know, teacher has to look and make sure the name is somebody on their class list and then admit them. We've had instructions going out primarily through the teaching and learning side to buildings and teachers as it relates to what steps they should be implementing to create Zoom meetings with the appropriate security settings, and then how to administer those meetings. And that's the same process that we'll use when we roll out this authenticated user change in a large scale way. Again, we really want to test that with a smaller number first to make sure that it's something that's not going to cause more problems as we roll out.
So, Adam, this is Charlie Eastham. Listening to your description of the number of open service request tickets that you have and your response to them, I think I think you have a good plan. But can you talk about what opportunities there might be, or how we're utilizing building staff to address service-related problems that users, either teachers or students, are having within that building? Are there things that they can you ask them to respond to a ticket if that's appropriate?
We have been providing information to the buildings in a number of ways. I'm a member of a committee that's met regularly here lately, and kudos to Laura Daly for establishing that. And we've really worked to try to identify what information do staff at the buildings need to be able to answer some of these questions, especially as it relates to questions that might be tied to students who have barriers to accessing instruction. And so we've packaged some instructions there and got them out to teachers. We have a website resource that's been shared a number of times with teachers that includes answers to basic questions, and are working right now on expanding that a bit. So, you know, in a lot of cases, if it's an issue with a password or that sort of thing, our building staff are in pretty good shape to be able to address those and fix them right on the spot without generating more support tickets that come to us necessarily. That said, our system's not really set up to give building staff visibility into our actual in-progress support tickets. Our software requires registered agents, and we don't have registered agents within the buildings. It would be pretty expensive to add them. But at the same time, we've really encouraged through our communications home for students experiencing issues or families experiencing issues that their first go-to should be their child's teacher or their child's building librarian or another school staff member they're in contact with. And that speaks to, one of the challenges, and we've talked about this at length and tried to provide resources to sort of direct things in that way. Our technology office forever, for its entire existence, has really been signed up or set up to support staff members directly and to support student requests that filter through staff members. And, in the spring, that paradigm pretty suddenly changed. So we're working to try to get information out that will help staff members support those issues a little bit better. Because of the complexity of the tickets that we're facing right now, it's not always possible. I mean, a lot of these probably have to come to us ultimately.
Well, thanks for that response. And maybe that's some areas where we could, that's providing resources there might be something we really need to look at more closely, Matt, as we go along here. Very much, appreciate the IT department's ability to get their number of tickets down, but we're still looking at a fairly large number of kids and staff that are having user problems. And I also would like to ask this time, maybe Sean or Matt, if we can address the YouTube issue that was brought up during the comment period too.
And I would appreciate Adam. I know Adam gave some direction there of what I guess I'd be looking at. What can parents do if they are concerned about it on their children's devices? Kind of some why we do it the way we do it, and then what is it that parents can do if they want to take some action on their own.
Yep, I'm happy to speak to that. So as an educational institution, it's not unique to us or even unique to K-12. We're always walking a pretty fine line in terms of providing access to valuable educational resources while trying to ensure the safety of our students. YouTube is a service that I've had questions about probably every year of my career. And we as a district, since I've arrived and before I was here, have always had allowed access to YouTube for our students and teachers. And that's really in line with common practice across the state. Most districts allow access to YouTube. I would welcome some of my colleagues to speak more to some of the value of the educational resources. But one thing that we have as a district is our district technology committee, which includes community representatives, teachers, students, and members of our tech staff, actually addresses questions regarding filtering of content that isn't necessarily a clear block or allow per federal law, which we do meet. And something like YouTube would fall into that area. So if we got a request from a staff member to block YouTube, it would go to that committee for discussion, and we'd seek input from those making the request. We'd seek input from others, and then they'd make a recommendation. Typically a service like YouTube, which is used heavily among our staff, we really look to rely on YouTube's own terms of service. We don't allow websites that specifically provide pornography, for instance. YouTube's terms of service say that they do not allow pornography, they don't allow explicit content, they don't allow hate speech, they don't allow dangerous content or content that would be dangerous to minors. However, YouTube is huge. There are people who find ways to get around those filters, and there's a reporting mechanism built into YouTube. YouTube does have a feature that can be enabled for a domain that allows a district to filter mature content. And we have turned that on in the past and received, without exaggeration, hundreds of complaints within days from teachers and students that legitimate materials could not be accessed. There's no ability to tweak that filter. It's either on or off. And so as a district at that time, this was about 2 years ago, we decided to turn that off, again, which is in keeping with practice of most other districts. Parents do have the ability through our Securely software, and there are instructions for this that should have been emailed to all parents as soon as their student received a one-to-one device, or shortly thereafter should have received an email welcoming them to the Securely parent portal with some instructions to administer that either via the web or via the Securely app. We also have instructions for that on the technology blog. But parents do have the ability to go in and restrict access to sites or services for their students when the students are off campus. Now, this year is kind of weird because everybody right now is off campus all the time. Normally, what that would allow is that if a parent doesn't want their child using YouTube when they're off campus, they wouldn't have access to it. When they're on campus, they would be following the same security filters that all other students are following. This prevents serious issues in our classrooms if our teachers are expecting to rely on a resource and then many students can't access it. Right now, though, parents do have the ability to go in and turn off YouTube or Google Hangouts or any website they would choose, and it would turn that website off for their students at all times. Parents do not have the ability to make the filters less restrictive. And the big reason for that is that we are required by federal law to filter to a certain level. And we're required to do that whether a device is on our network or not. And so we need to ensure that a certain minimum level of filtering is in place for all of our devices at all times.
Hi, Adam. Can you hear me?
Hi, and welcome.
Hello?
Yes,
Go ahead.
can you?
Hi.
Yep.
So I was just wondering, is it possible, maybe I'm a little ignorant when it comes to this, but is it possible to have just YouTube for kids? I think there's like a YouTube for kids on just the younger kids, their Chromebooks, instead of having regular YouTube. Is that possible?
It is technically possible, but that's not the direction we've gotten from our teachers based upon the resources that are available there. We've also run into some problems with not that service in particular, but some similar services, because what they're actually, and this is technical, but what they're actually doing is acting as a web proxy. And so while they're providing a safe service on one hand, they're actually providing a vector that kids could exploit to access whatever they want on the other. So there are a few complexities there, but ultimately, whatever direction we get from our teachers and from the technology committee is the direction that we follow as it relates to content filtering. At this point, I don't know that I've yet received any request from a staff member to block YouTube at any grade level.
Thank you.
I just want to chime in with the teacher perspective, since I'm not sure if there are any on this side of the meeting, but I talked to my husband about this, and he uses YouTube daily with his videos. And when we did have the YouTube filter in place, he would have to send a request to the tech department for them to give permission for those students to access that one video. That would take 2 days. It takes a lot of time and energy, and it's just not it's not something that can be a workaround. And teachers are using YouTube regularly, and so the teacher perspective here is that we can't put the filters on YouTube if we expect our teachers to be able to use it as a teaching tool. That was before pandemic and online teaching. And so I can only imagine now with how we've moved on to online, how important it'll be for our teachers to have access to unfiltered YouTube.
So thanks, Lisa and Drami. I don't understand YouTube very well at all. Is it possible to have YouTube restrictions more prevalent for younger users, or is that a possibility? Adam, you or Lisa, Drami, anybody could respond, please.
Yeah, so from a technical standpoint, as it relates to a block that we would implement through our content filtering service, that can be targeted. So it could be targeted at lower grades, for instance. If we didn't want to allow access to YouTube for pre-K through 3, for instance, or pre-K through 6, that's something that we could do. In terms of requiring safe search, we could accomplish the same thing. So we could also require, enable that YouTube filter just for certain grade levels. Again, I appreciate Director Williams' comments. It's a situation where, when we had that filter enabled, the big problem with it was the intelligence of the filter. It was looking at things like words in comments, which might have nothing to do with the video, and blocking them. So we were getting complaints from all grade level teachers. And I would expect that we would continue to see that.
So I guess right now what I'm hearing, there's not a very good solution to go forward with, except to put it fairly broadly, maybe, or rather bluntly, maybe, is to rely upon parents to look at what their kids are using their Chromebooks for. Is that where we're at, or being too unsympathetic here?
Take, Charlie, from what we heard from a couple of the community commenters, and then also from what Adam is sharing, our continual effort to try to communicate to parents about what they can do and how they can create some further restrictions on the devices. And so I think the take back for us there is, I'm not sure you're right. I don't think there's a better solution necessary for YouTube, as the internal side of the team has already tried to wrestle with that and talk to our teachers about it. But I do think, parents deserve to be well informed about what they can do to try to restrict that. So of course, I think our effort then needs to be on how we communicate those tools and their ability to use those and know how to further do that. And so we'll work to continue to communicate out some of that information, or to make sure it gets communicated out so that parents have that and they know that that's a potential risk for them if they're not stepping in and using those tools. So I think that's just a relevant piece we need to be doing in this environment right now anyways, that might not have been as high level of a concern before, but in a fully online environment, it certainly has become. I think Amy wanted to jump in with some engagement data here, so I'll let her also chime in.
Thanks, Matt. And Charlie, I'm going to try to address your question around student engagement. Adam was alluding to it earlier, but I just want to share with the board and the members of the audience that this has been a critical area of emphasis for our team, especially over the past couple of weeks. We've made a concerted effort to be all in around student engagement. So most of the admins on this call tonight have been involved in some conversation the last couple of weeks to understand the student barriers that our students might be facing, and then to also understand the numbers that might be facing those barriers, and then create action plans and communicate back to our building. So each of the last 2 weeks, we've surveyed our building principals and asked them questions such as, how many students do you expect to have on your campus, virtual campus? And then last week, how many of those students had not signed on for a single synchronous activity in the first 5 days? Today we asked, or yesterday we asked, in the first 10 days. So it kind of set the stage that way. And what we learned from that was we had about 265 students the previous week experiencing barriers such as computer needed repair, had access to internet, but the internet was unreliable, maybe had both of those things, but didn't understand how to access or maybe even turn the computer on, right? We have a one-to-one situation for many of our students for the first time. So turning the computer on, logging on, getting onto Clever, Canvas, you name it, Seesaw, that kind of question was asked. And then you just trying to figure out too, were there unique family circumstances? And then what were those unknown reasons? And so when we surveyed our campuses the first time, we had them roughly reporting around 265 students were experiencing those barriers. So as our team convened to look at the data, we came up with a game plan and we offered some different ideas. I'm sure some of the ideas that we shared with them by and large that they were already utilizing, but we also gave them some that I think helped spur some different thoughts. So in addition to that, Laura utilized a few of the ESC leaders that she supervises, and they were supporting our feeder systems. And so when we were noticing large numbers of students in any one of those areas experiencing barriers, they were helping to tackle and brainstorm with the buildings through that. And then yesterday, we were excited to see that our data had decreased from around 265 students with barriers to 123 students. So we feel like we're definitely making headway and are monitoring that. So our action plan actually coming out of just this morning after we reviewed these results are, we're gonna now look at it on a student by student basis, as well as try to see where there's the connection between the families that would be on multiple campuses, but maybe our 123 students are maybe more representative of 100 families. So continuing to monitor that data, we're looking at this like we would want our buildings to approach either MTSS in the academic way or for social emotional behaviorals, and just try to support through that kind of tiered process of what else can we be doing to support our families. So just want to share that we are having a heavy concentration on making sure our students are engaged.
Thank you, Amy. And of course, I and I'm sure everybody else really appreciates your method and your effort there. And it'd be great if we can get 120 to be 0 in the next couple of weeks. I don't know what you're looking forward to in terms of difference in experience when everyone's in the hybrid model, but
yeah, that's certainly something we looked at today. And we also talked about, of those 123 students, how many are enrolled in the online learning program versus the standard enrollment option. So that's something we're also exploring. And that's the work that we'll be doing this week and asking our buildings to help with as well. The other thing is we're trying to kind of sort through what other sets of data do we have at our fingertips that also would paint the picture, help tell us a story. And we know that we can look into how many contacts our students are making within the Canvas learning management system. And we're exploring whether we can do that in Seesaw as well. So just trying to continue to brainstorm different ways that we could tell how often our students are engaging.
So the last piece that we're going to focus on this evening from our operations side for the Return to Learn is on our employees and looking at staffing. Charlie mentioned the move to the hybrid and how we're staffing that and how we staff the online program, as well as leave options and how we're supporting our staff in this time of COVID and looking for ways to help meet their needs as we move into a different phase of learning this spring. And so, or excuse me, this fall. Nick and Jeremy are going to lead the presentation tonight, but just kind of as I mentioned there, Nick, if you want to go forward one, kind of where we're going to go this evening. Nick's going to talk through the staffing process, how we came to assign individuals into the online program or remain in a building based position. And then Jeremy's going to talk through the ADA accommodations and leave, especially under the federal laws that are specific to COVID, and how we have utilized those in our conversations with our staff. And so I'll turn it over to Nick and Jeremy to guide us through this piece this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Chase, and thank you, directors, and welcome, Director Etsy, to the school board. We're happy to have you. And kind of, I'd like to just start with, this has been kind of the HR team has been working through, I think back to my days as an elementary teacher, like a story problem that just all the variables though keep changing. It's just been a very unique scenario for us, whether it is on the staffing size or the leave side. And then of course, as we're getting close to getting some of our information, as parents are making their selection to the model they'd like to choose, there's a derecho that shortens our timeline and cuts out Power School Access. So it's been an interesting thing. So we'll start here with some of the facts and the information that's out there. Early on this summer, we asked for teachers to express interest in teaching online. It wasn't an application process or anything. It was really looking for interest. Who would have interest in that? And 373 teachers expressed interest in being online or in some, and it was a variety of reasons. Some it was for needs, some was personal preference, and a large number were just simply our team, and I think Brady can attest to this, our teachers wanting to be good team players and helping out however they can, and just saying, hey, we want to help out in whatever way possible. As we worked through the elementary staffing, we realized very quickly that we were going to have a high number of just online sections that were going to be made up of students online. With the high percentage of people selecting the online option, we ended up with 139 online teachers, as you can see here. 221 and a half remain on site. And then there's about 248 people who work with our students in a variety of capacities that have what we would consider a blended assignment. And you'll see as we transition to our secondary schools, a blended assignment is probably our most common assignment across the district. And there's a variety of reasons for this, as we'll get into later on. But the blended assignment where people are working both in schools and online is the most common by far. And it actually influenced a number of our decisions in regards to schedules that Amy shared with you earlier and other pieces of information. So we could have teachers have that ability to finish teaching a class and then hop on their computer and lead a session in Zoom. As you look here in our junior high and high school, you'll see that the number of online teachers significantly is reduced, but the blended teacher assignment is still pretty significant. And that's because of the same that we just described, where we have a number of people who are going back and forth between periods in the online or in-person scenarios. Later, I'll talk more about certification, but a lot of our online only, in particular at the high school, are in some of our most common classes that a large number of students are signing up for. Things like English 9 and 10, or an Algebra 2, or something that where you're gonna have a large population of students needing to take it, and that's a teacher's typical assignment. They may have ended up with an online assignment. We have a large number of people, again, in those blended, both sets, and then the on-site only. So those, you can kind of see how that breaks down within our building. This is some of the work, and I give credit to Scott Kibbe here, and I won't have this up here long, but some of the work that we did in advance where we're having to look at, especially in our secondary schools, where kids have the opportunity to select their classes. So now we've added a whole nother layer. Not only do parents select the instructional model for their children, but also now students are selecting classes and families are selecting classes. So we really had to look at what our online needs were, what our remaining needs were at other buildings, and how to work through it. So just the complexity of that work was very time consuming and challenging as we worked through that, and we're making guesses as to what it would look like as we tried to put it into a schedule. There was a lot of things that we looked at in regards to staffing, and I think these are some things that we'd love to share and have people have an understanding of. Health and safety was obviously one of our first concerns, and we really leaned heavily on kind of looking at ADA accommodations, which Jeremy's going to share more about later on, and the FFCRA, which is the oh goodness, First Corona Response Act. I blanked on it all of a sudden, my apologies. And then the minimizing, and so those were, I mean, there, and that whole FFCRA is an extension of FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, and there's many pieces and components, and we've spent way too much time in webinars and talking to legal people and reading posters and Q&As and all sorts of stuff to learn about this, because this was something that was enacted this year and it runs through December. And then health and safety also, we really wanted to minimize multiple building assignments as best we can. We didn't want to have staff members that were traveling between buildings. There's some situations where that's just unavoidable, but we tried to keep that to a minimum. Teacher certification became a huge consideration for us in our online programming, especially in our secondary levels. As you know, in some courses, you may only have one teacher that can teach that specific math class or that specific science class or journalism or something. There's all these unique classes. So certification became a huge factor in how we had to adjust. And one of the reasons we learned very quickly at the secondary level that we were going to have many blended assignments because we were going to need those people with those specialty certifications to be able to be available to our kids that were online and also to our students that were in person. So that certification piece, it wasn't as applicable in the elementary level just because that's more of a generic or a general K6, K8 certification, but it played heavily into our secondary schools. Student roster allocation, this was one of the pieces that we noticed. A lot of times people wondered, well, how did some folks get online assignments, and how a roster was allocated really made that difference. This applied to areas like the elementary classrooms, it applied to ELL, special education. This also had a huge impact on our paraprofessional staffing that's still kind of in progress as we work into the hybrid model, because depending on the student or students that they're supporting and what their instructional status is, that's going to kind of have a determination as to what their assignment may be. And one thing that came loud and clear as we talked with the ICEA and Brady and different things is, we were worried for quite some time this summer that this would be a complete apple cart over situation where we're really having to turn over our entire staff. And that wasn't necessarily the case. We really wanted to try to minimize staff reassignments and not have people be reassigned to new buildings. And we were able to do that in the vast majority of situations, especially in our classroom positions, which was encouraging that we're able to keep people connected to their home school. It's a little more complicated with some of our online assignments, keeping that connection to the home school, but I think we've made some great efforts there to tie people back to their original buildings. And hopefully as we, progress over time, this will be something that can evolve along with it as parents and students' choices change. We really had to look at the efficiency and effectiveness of our scheduling. There were ways we could have maybe done some things differently, but we chose that if it was going to cause additional travel, then we lose teaching time. And we're not in I know if I were to talk to Les over there and say, hey, Les, I've got an idea that we're going to reduce the amount our teachers can teach because they're going to be driving from building to building, I don't think he's going to be a big fan, because I think the financial responsibility there is lost because we're having people drive between buildings instead of teaching our students. So that was another reason that played into that idea of the blended assignment, because it doesn't take much for a teacher. I shouldn't say it doesn't take much. It's difficult. I'm not going to say that it's not. But from a logistics point of view, to go from classroom to getting onto a Zoom, that's manageable. And that's something that our teachers were able to do versus driving across town to another high school or another elementary school or whatever it might be. We wanted to also have a plan that we felt would maintain some flexibility at the trimester. As we all know, that's when we're allowing parents' choice to change, and depending on our community and the response that's there and where our rates are and all those other things, that can have a huge influence on what's going to look like at the trimester. So we wanted to be able to have some flexibility, and we felt like this did the best we could. And finally, all of our decisions in this were very much in compliance with, the Iowa State law, bargaining agreement, and our ICEA piece. We work very closely with Brady and his team in a variety of scenarios as we work through staffing things, as we work through, everything down to specific people, situations, to some of the larger scale decisions that had to be made. So those were some of our guideposts there, and the work that we did to make some of the decisions we did related to the staffing and solving that puzzle as best we can. There's still some challenges ahead, and actually, in all honesty, we're still working through some of these staffing considerations right now as we are transitioning into a hybrid model. But I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy to talk a little bit about some leave things. And Jeremy, you can just tell me when you want me to move your slides forward for you.
Thanks, Nick. And congratulations, Director Etsy. Glad to have you aboard, and I look forward to working with you. So I'm going to start off tonight by discussing the Americans with Disabilities Act. The first priority of the ADA is to prevent discrimination against disabled employees in all aspects of their employment within any organization. Tonight, we'll talk about how the district has used ADA as part of our responses to employee requests for accommodations. First off, I want to make sure that everyone understands that an injury or an illness does not necessarily or is not considered as a disability. For something to be considered a disability, it has to impact your life significantly, and it has to be something that has been documented for a long period of time and will continue to impact your life moving forward. If an employee makes a request for an accommodation under the ADA, the district is required to implement what's considered a reasonable accommodation that will allow the employee to perform the essential parts of their job. I want to make sure again that it's understood that not being able to perform one part or just a small part of the job does not meet the qualification of being considered a reasonable accommodation. It must be something that it must help you perform the essential parts of your job that without those actions, you wouldn't be able to perform your job at all. Examples of a reasonable accommodation include, say for example, a manufacturing company providing prescription safety glasses for a manufacturing employee on the production line to maintain their safety. Or another example would be altering the schedule of an office employee who needs to work 40 hours a day, but let's say they also need to see their doctor every Friday. So altering their schedule from an 8x5 to a 4x10 would be something that the organization could do to help that person to meet the accommodations or to make the accommodations that they have to meet their personal requirements. A company is not required is to make an accommodation that creates what is called an undue hardship. An example of an undue hardship for an organization is needing to hire another employee to take the spot of a person or to fulfill part of their job, or making a alteration to someone's job that actually changes the primary functions of the organization or impacts them not being able to do what it is that are the company is in place to do. Nick, can you change the slide for me? An example of a disability that would be approved under COVID that typically does not impact the ability of an employee to perform their job would be someone who has a autoimmune deficiency or something related to asthma or some other type of lung illness. Generally, these would not impact someone being able to perform their jobs on a regular basis. But with something like COVID being available, if they were to contract that, then that's something that could potentially be seriously harmful for them and could potentially take away their life, unfortunately. Unfortunately, ADA accommodations apply only to employee-specific conditions, health conditions. If there's a desire or a need to care for a family member, or if there's a need to avoid any potential exposures for a family member, those do not fall into the category of being something that we approved under ADA, because it, again, does not apply specifically to the employee. While we've seen some requests to work primarily from home be approved, making such a request is not guaranteed. For example, we can change an assignment of an employee or the location where they work to meet the accommodations that they requested without necessarily being able to allow them to or need them to work from home. While some of this may be possible in some buildings, there are also situations where another building may not be able to accommodate a request or an accommodation that was put in place for one employee. So each situation that we have to deal with is unique, whether it's the employee's medical condition, whether it's the employee's job or specific responsibilities, what building they work in. All of those things we have to take into account when we're reviewing whether or not we need to make an accommodation or what type of an accommodation we need to make. So, I can't look at you and say, okay, you have this condition and you have this job, that means you're going to do X, and expect someone else to have the same outcome, if they were in the exact same situation. Change the slide for me, Nick. So this graphic highlights the number of requests that we've received so far and how we've been able to be flexible when we've only had to deny 11% of the requests that we've received. As of yesterday, and these numbers are as of yesterday, just today, I received another 3 requests for accommodation. I actually got another one while we're in this meeting today, just to show you how frequently that these requests are coming in, especially as we get closer to changing our model, going to the hybrid, and then I would expect we would receive more when we go to the 100% on-site model moving forward. But we continue to work with our staff to get these approved and to ensure that we're doing the things that we need to do to allow our employees to still work and doing so safely. Next slide for me. As Nick discussed earlier, one of the options that we have also for employees is the FMLA, and then there's the FFCRA, Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And then the other piece that we use is any of the leave options that are available under our negotiated agreement. So we try to work with our employees to make sure that we're putting something on the table for them that will allow them to take the time away from work or put them in a situation where they'll still be able to perform their job to the best of their capabilities. Next slide for me. Specifically with the FFCRA, that's something that's very specific to COVID. It was a law that was put in place by Congress, and it's only available through December 31st. What the FFCRA allows is for employees to have up to 10 days of paid sick leave at their full pay if they're unable to work due to a doctor's requirement, or if they've been told to quarantine because of different federal law, state law, local law, or in a different situation or different circumstances, that employee or an employee may be allowed to receive 2/3 of their pay for 10 days if they're unable to work because they need to care for an individual who's been required to quarantine. And again, that's either or. One or the other of those situations would allow you to be paid for those 80 hours. After that 80 hours, employees can receive up to 10 weeks of approved leave to be able to care for their child who does not have or whose place of childcare is closed. One thing that will happen is we will begin to experience that as we go to the hybrid model. If we have employees who their children are on site for Monday, Tuesday, but then they can't, their child is not available, or excuse me, school is not available Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The staff member, the employee will be able to receive approved leave for those days that their child is not in school. So that's something that's also going to impact our staffing moving forward. We're going to make sure that we have to accommodate for that as we look to make changes. Next slide for me. These are just, I've kind of tried to summarize a lot of the different language that's out there from a legal standpoint. As I said earlier, coverage is available, or leave is available for those who are required to quarantine on their own, who have family members or children that have been required to quarantine, if they're experiencing symptoms related to COVID, or even if they're experiencing symptoms that have come up and, that maybe aren't here today, but they've come up recently that have been, put in place by the Secretary of Health and Human Services or some other federal or local agency. So there's always constantly changing reasons that someone may be eligible for any of these types of leave that causes us to, from an HR standpoint, from a staffing standpoint, to make sure that we're, staying on top of our toes so that we can continue to provide our employees and our staff with all of the resources, the leave that they need and that they will need in order to help them to make sure that they can take care of themselves, take care of their families, to avoid spreading COVID, or to make sure that they're doing the things that they need to take care of their own health and safety. Next slide for me, Nick. So this slide here is just, we want to, from an HR standpoint, highlight, the number of our staff that we've assisted with each one of these types of leave over the course of the this school year and going into last school year. From an FFCRA standpoint, 32, COVID-related leave of absence, 11, FMLA 60. And the FMLA is just specific to COVID-related leaves. That doesn't account the people that we've had take FMLA for reasons not related to COVID. And then, of course, like I talked about, the ADA approvals. With all of these combined, we've had to work with or provide leave or assistance to, over 150 employees here over the last few months. So, that's a very high number. And we expect that number to continue to grow here over the next few weeks as our educational model continues to change. But that's something that we're committed to as a group, to making sure that we're taking care of our staff, putting all the things in place that we need to do to stay both compliant and to continue to make sure that we're being responsible for our employees and putting them in the best place to take care of themselves and their family from a health and safety standpoint. Anything that I missed or didn't quite cover, Nick or Chase? Or does any of the board members have any questions?
I have questions, but I can wait until they say if you've missed anything.
I think we're ready for you, Ruthina.
Yeah, go ahead,
We're
Ruthina.
ready for questions.
All right. Okay, sorry, and I'm probably going to make your head hurt, but I just want to make sure that I understand, or for any staff people that may be listening. So say we have a staff person that has to quarantine for 10 days. And so they use that first section. And then what if, like, the next week they get a loved one that ends up being sick and they have to stay home to take care of them? Can they utilize that first pot getting full pay for their own 10 days and then turn around and use the 2/3 pay, or is it just one shot and you're done?
I'll go. We can all answer it, I think, but the first 10 days would be at the full pay. And then after that, if it's a different event, we'd probably be looking at them using some of their own leave options, which then would still be at the full pay. The 2/3 really applies more in the scenario with childcare and stuff. So, but we'd work with all those individuals. Hopefully no one's facing a circumstance where they have to quarantine twice or but it's very possible. Yeah, very much so. So we'll work through those. And one thing that we said early on that I'd want to highlight is, for a number of our staff members, Brady, who's, an experienced staff member for us, he probably has ample sick days to make that work. But for some of our newer staff members, they may not be in that boat. So we'll work with them in those scenarios. And that's why you'll see that and not just Jeremy and I think we need to give a shout out to the whole HR team, have been working with people on a daily basis of how to handle some of these scenarios and make sure that our folks are taken care of as best we can.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Jeremy, that was really comprehensive. Thank you for that. And I'm really, really pleased to see this work. A question, maybe not for district employees, because it's clear that y'all have our district employees covered. Do we know what our bus service supplier is doing in terms of ADA and options for those employees?
I don't, Janet. I can check with them and see if they'd be willing to share that information, but they try to take care of their employees as well, and have worked with us in terms of putting mitigation standards in place on the buses. And so I don't have those details, but I'm happy to check with our colleagues down there and see what they can share with me.
Yeah, thanks. There's part of our essential workforce, and just want to make sure they're have the same kind of opportunities for benefits. Yep.
And hi, I'm back again. Sorry. Do we know how many people ended up taking a leave of absence because their requests weren't approved? Do you have a number, or is that something you can't share because of personnel reasons?
Jeremy, did you want that?
Yes, and the number that we have in the presentation, I believe it was 11. Are individuals that we've pulled out for specifically COVID-related situations. I would say those are really, really extreme situations that someone has needed to take a leave of absence. Typically, one of the other types of leave, especially FMLA, are going to cover, the type of absence that someone may need to take, just because FMLA in itself is, 12 weeks. So if someone has something going on that's more than, 3 months long, then, that's going to be something that's pretty significant for them and for their family, for them to be able to, for them to need to request a leave of absence, especially this early in the school year.
Okay, and just to be clear, folks that request the leave of absence, they're not drawing pay. So that significantly impacts their family's ability to, I don't know, live. So when teachers or staff people have concerns, and, rightfully so, when other folks say, well, just take a leave, that is what's happening, right? They are not earning any type of funds.
Well, there's one, I would add in there for one point is we have a number of our employees that may start in an FMLA type model if they were to qualify because of some health concerns. And then from there, it may turn into a leave of absence. So during that FMLA, depending on what their leave situation is, they would be getting pay and continuing their benefits. But those who take a leave of absence, you're absolutely right, Ruthina, it is pay and benefits. And when we had some sessions early on with Jeremy and Brady and the HR team, we tried to go through all those things with everyone, because that is a huge decision for families, and it's a tough spot to be in. We absolutely know that. And I think that's one of the things that I'd share is, we've had to work through some really, hard situations. Our folks are dealing with really tough stuff and working through those and trying to find the best option that works for them, but also then works for our system. It has been challenging at times.
And I swear, last question. Thank you both for the presentation, but is it possible for it to be uploaded to Board Docs, just so directors and the public have access to that information?
Absolutely.
We were still collecting some of the data today and just kind of getting through some of, making sure our numbers were exactly where they were as up to date as possible, but we can do that.
Thank you, I'm done.
And Nick, are you going to update the numbers as we go along here?
You kind of cut out a little bit there, Charlie.
I'm sorry. Are you going? I'm sorry. Are you going to update the numbers as we go along here over the next several months?
We can absolutely do that. I think it will be evolving. I think we'll see a change probably in the leave of absence, depending on what the situation is. Typical FMLA lasts 12 weeks, so we'll have a sense there. We'll have some more people who have taken leave of absence, but that's something we can absolutely do. We'll probably have a change, I would say, even as early as next week, because there is some folks that are making some hard decisions during the course of this week in preparation for our return to hybrid. Some people are comfortable with that, and others are. That's a hard piece for them to consider. So they're making some determinations there, or they're working with Jeremy to see what accommodations can be in place. I think that's why he mentioned he's been a busy man lately, getting a lot of emails, but we can keep that updated for you.
Okay, thank you.
This is Brady. If I could just jump in on that. I just want to, I know we have a lot of staff members who watch these or who are attendees tonight, and just to sort of amplify what, Nick is saying and Jeremy and Ruthina, your comments. I have a really deep appreciation and respect for how hard this is for some of our employees, and not just teachers. They're facing some potentially just heartbreaking decisions that they have to make, and it is incredibly, incredibly difficult. And so I appreciate, Ruthina, you saying it's just not just saying, we'll just take a leave is just not really an appropriate or sensitive thing. And no one is, saying this in this panel, so I'm not trying to suggest that, but I just want to just recognize how hard it is for some of our people. And I think we are doing a great job. We really are working together and trying to process that to the best of our ability. But this is one of the outcomes. These are heartbreaking decisions for some folks. But there's a great team working with them. Every meeting I've been in they've been incredibly compassionate and empathetic. So.
Thanks for that, Brady. And thank you for the questions. I do think that's all for our return to learn item, unless there's any ideas or questions that board members want to circle back to. But I would just, wrap up echoing the same thing that Brady said. I mean, from, all of the different pieces we've talked about today, and then all the way to this end of the conversation with the ADA and the FMLA requests, we know it's tough on our people. It's tough on the people navigating the new lay of the land. It's tough on our folks that are faced with really difficult decisions. And so trying to show the best empathy and grace we can for each other and work through those situations. And we know that not all of them probably meet everybody's expectations, but we wanted to give you a framework of how we're working through those and the reasons behind some of those decisions.
So I did have one question that wasn't really specific to any of the topics. I was just kind of curious, what's happening this week for staff? What kind of PD or what kind of supports is being given as they spent the last couple of weeks working out all the kinks on online learning, and now they're getting thrust into, or at least some of them, right, are getting thrust into doing the hybrid plan. And I know that that's a huge change for them. So I'm just kind of curious what things are happening this week to support them and help them prepare for next week.
Sure. So I'll start with that and then ask Amy if she wants to provide any further level of detail, or Scott or Diane as well. But so today we had our usual Tuesday line of meetings. And so we would have had cabinet this morning and then administrative council this afternoon, which is with all the principals. So the directors in the morning and then the principals in the afternoon. And so there we, of course, reviewed some of the health and safety mitigation efforts, or those health and safety components that we walked through with you guys in some greater detail, so that those leaders are ready to support the different teams, and that information is getting rolled out this week. So, our teachers are obviously carrying their full online load this week, and then also trying to, the principals will be arranging meeting times around those to be reviewing what the building, how it's going to look and how it's going to operate as we start that first day of in-person learning next week. I know there was some conversation around why that week was necessary for our staff. And, you saw some of my email responses to that when staff started on the 31st, we really had 4 days with all of our employees. And so the need to try to do our regular back to school business and then provide professional development around our key values around equity, along with online learning, really consumed those 4 days in a hurry and did not leave a lot of time. And so we did the best we could with what was in front of us to plan and prepare for that. And then, yes, we've continued to try to have that conversation and really ramp that up this week on those building level teams with our leaders, working with our teaching staff and support staff to make sure they're ready to go next week, Sean. So with that, if team members want to add any more detail or specifics to that, but that's the general concept as far as why some of that transition time was needed. And then also what is going on or what is occurring this week with those different teaching faculties.
And I'd just add that last week was a building PD day. This Wednesday was supposed to be a district day, more of a curriculum day, and we flip-flopped that with the next Wednesday so that schools and principals could have more time with their staff on health and safety and those kind of things. Just like you heard the students talk about, there's new webinars that they're rolling out, principals are, so that the students can get acclimated to hybrid. That's the logic around flip-flopping that PD so that the teachers can get their heads wrapped around that as well.
And John, this is Brady. I'd give a shout out to the teaching and learning side for being willing to make that change on the PD. We had a good conversation, and I think the building administrators definitely appreciated it and supported it, and so did teachers. Absolutely, just being able to dedicate that time on Wednesday to really just as a team sit and think through some of the logistics. And I'd also say to Chase and the operations side that we really appreciated having the ability to, on a controlled basis, to get into some of our facilities over the weekend and then coming up this weekend. That was really awesome for teachers, just to have some limited amount of times with the safe restrictions that we've been putting into place to allow us to get into our classrooms and start getting those set up. And that's especially important for some folks who maybe had an assignment change and we're really just working night and day to deal with that. So just on both sides of the house. I think that's where the partnership pays off, is that you can have conversations where you just say, can we move this around? Because we have some real specific needs we didn't anticipate, and everyone's been great about doing that.
Thanks, Brady. And that's the point I was going to make, is that's one of the things that Matt alluded to, is our folks just needed more time, and nobody wants to work on the weekends, especially as hard as they're working during the week. But that's one thing we thought we could do, Sean, was to provide them access to the buildings. We did try to balance it against the need to clean, and that's especially a difficult balance since we're bringing so many more people into the buildings. But teachers have been teaching in a different environment, and everybody wants to feel as comfortable as possible in their space. And so that's something that was important to us, and able to make that change on the fly to provide, I think it was 6 hours of access on Saturday and 4 hours of access on Sunday last weekend. And again, 6 hours of potential access this Saturday and 4 on Sunday. And by no means is there an expectation that teachers are in there the entire time, right? We want everybody to keep a good work-life balance. And so we don't want people in buildings 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's not good for individuals' own health and well-being. But we also understand the anxiousness associated with being ready to go when we get to finally welcome kids back into our buildings on Monday.
Yeah, Chase, I had seen you had unmuted. I wanted to beat you to the thank you. So.
I appreciate that. I know that, teachers are working hard to provide instruction, but at the same time also working hard just to try and navigate the new normal, all right? And that new normal is now changing to another new normal, right? And I appreciate the support that's there, and whatever, I asked the question, but whatever we can do as a board to help support some of those transitions, we'd like to hear about it, right, and see what we can do, because I know it's a tough spot as we make those transitions, and I'm hopeful that we're not transitioning a lot of times, right? Because we have the potential of transitioning back and forth depending on how things go. It would be really great if we could really limit the number of times we have to force our staff to change direction. So I appreciate any support we can offer there.
Thanks, Sean. We really appreciated that additional time this week, and then you get 2 weekends in there. The training time we get on Wednesday, that was very, very appreciated.
That's awesome. Is there any other comments or questions from directors on this? All right. If not, let's go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, kind of an update on where we're at with some of our equity action steps. Matt, are you leading that off?
Yes, I am. So thank you. Our next item centers around equity action steps, and this is something we want to remain committed to and have urgency around. And so to that end, I think this is a piece that you'll see regularly on our agendas, and I would like to see regularly on agendas as a point to continue to come back to, and to try to anchor our work to that commitment we made over the summer when we met with different groups, including the Iowa Freedom Riders, the District Equity Committee, and then just our value around equity, and knowing that that's our system has to see substantial improvements to work for all kids. And so to that end, the equity action steps we had presented to the board went through an exercise about trying to rank some priorities around some of that work. Again, not that any of those are less than important than another, but we had to identify a place where we could really begin. And so with that, we're really focused on a few different areas, and then a couple of different components around that work as well. And so tonight we'll talk to you a little bit about teacher professional development and training, and so kind of that support aspect. Also an accountability piece around development of a standard into the teacher evaluation and administrator evaluation system. We wanted to talk about discipline protocols and procedures and a review of those. The Ombudsman position that we've mentioned to you before, in the development of that and the eventual filling of that role to help students or staff navigate complaints when things do not go as planned in the building, or when there's claims that they need help being able to navigate the system to know how to bring those claims and concerns forward. I'm looking at my list here to make sure I touched on all the different pieces that we said we'd work with you. And then I think the final thing we would wrap up with tonight is we'll have Laura talk to you a little bit about our work towards a toolkit to help teachers receive some feedback on lesson design or unit design when they're teaching some hard topics. And we think that's a necessary support component as well. So I think I'm going to ask Chase to go first and talk a little bit about just the ombudsman position, just kind of general timeline when we think we'll have a job description and a posting ready to go. And then we can quickly transfer over to the teach and learning side and talk about some of those big three components that you guys identified in your priority work.
Sure. So I'll be brief this evening, although they are two very important topics. And the first is the ombudsman role. We are very excited about this. We're in the final stages of developing a job description for this position. I apologize, I'm not going to share it this evening simply because it's not in final form, and I don't want somebody to put it out there as, hey, this is what we're looking at, when it's not the final design. But we're very close, and we think we're going to be ready to post here in the next week or so, no later than October 1. And so we need to just put some finishing touches on the description, look for a couple of comparables on the compensation side and where it would fall inside of our compensation structure, and then we'll be ready to move it forward. We've pulled information from a variety of ombudsman programs that we found around the nation, mainly at the university level. It's not something that is prevalent in school districts yet, although it is a growing field, and I think it's an important one for K-12 systems to have. And so a lot of it will be modeled off of things that we've seen at the university level. And so that's really just a quick update of where we are. Again, I'm sorry I don't have an actual draft to share with you this evening, but we are getting ready, and we think we'll be able to post no later than the end of the month on that. I will happy to entertain any questions board members might have on our work around that new position.
I'd like to say here that earlier on I was pretty much in favor of, or very much in favor of, developing an ombudsperson's position. However, we had a conversation with the Equity Committee, I think 3 or 4 months ago now, and that group was really not all that enthusiastic about that being a significant part of what we're doing. And one of the points that I think that persuaded me from that conversation was that we'd like to have a system so that an ombudsman approach is not needed, because every student, every staff member is confident that when they bring a complaint or put forth a situation that they find troubling, that their voice, their word, their description will be taken thoroughly seriously and completely evaluated. I guess I'm not tonight willing to say that I'm not going to support going ahead with that position, but I just want us to. I think it's important for us to understand and to be aware that the idea may not be as attractive to some people in the district, that are working on these issues.
Really, I couldn't agree with you more that that's the system we would want. I think that would be the ideal, right? That's where we would want to have it land. I think our unfortunate reality is that's not where we're at currently. And so I think that is evidenced by stories we've heard, from our different groups and even students and staff that have taken to social media to share some of those. And so I think this idea was really born out of that fact that while we work to achieve a system that produces better results and produces better results around culture and climate where people feel comfortable doing that, this seemed to be a concept that would help folks navigate our large structure and our large systems when they don't necessarily feel that culture is upon them now. So like you said, I didn't hear you say you weren't ready to necessarily say you don't support it, but at the same time, I just think that would be an important thing for us to consider, is that while that's where we want to be, if we're being honest and transparent, I don't think that's where we're at in all of our cases. And so that's why we think it's a necessary step to take.
And I appreciate that that perspective, Matt. I very much do. And I don't want to I don't want to overstate the understanding of the equity committee about having this position created or not. But I just think it's important that as a board we have some cognizance of what other people are thinking about our ideas.
Sure.
And the thing I would add also, Charlie, is, and that's one of the difficulties of not having the job description in front of you to look at, but when we view the ombudsperson role, it's more than what you described. We also think as a source of information, as a resource for anyone in our school community to help understand how to, where to go, who to ask, where they can get information, quick answers to questions in an informal process that maybe doesn't take it going into the overall framework of the district. And so I'm hopeful, and as Matt articulated, that we get to the system that you described. But even when we get to that standpoint, I would suggest that there is still a position, a role for an ombudsperson inside our organization, because there is an expanded capacity that individual could play and could fill. And so like Matt, I hear what you're saying, and I understand it's a goal, but I just feel like that there is room for this individual to help us achieve our goals and ensure that we're living our values and what drives us, even beyond those tasks that you articulated as part of the job description.
Yeah, thanks. It's a good conversation.
Yeah, I'll just chime in for a second, just because I want to go, if I go back to 2016 and 2017, trust in the district was a major theme, and this often came up campaigning when people saying they wanted something like an ombudsperson as a check and to help build that trust. And I agree with what folks have said. I want to work toward getting that system. And at the same time, to me, beyond equity even, this is a position that might help us continue to gain back trust in the community and transparency.
Thanks, JP. I mean, I think our plan was to continue to move forward with this person. We've kind of talked about it here in, several different points. So if there is, some impetus for us to slow down on that or do something different, I think we'd want to know about it, because like Chase said, even though we don't have that quite firmed up yet, we would plan to move on that relatively quickly. One thing I know that I think I forgot to mention in my overview at the beginning that we'll kind of talk about in this next series is also curriculum. And so when you guys kind of looked at those priorities, again, thinking that those 9 action steps we had really talked about as an administrative team, all of them are important, all of them we need to do. But really the 3 that kind of captured the most attention were around professional development or training for staff, curriculum work, and then really looking at, an increased accountability mechanism through that standard work for administrators and teachers as well. And so those 3 kind of went together. The ombudsperson was ranked high, by a couple folks. And so that one was up there too. And I think that's a relatively easy one for us to move quickly on. And so some of these other components weren't necessarily top priority getters, but at the same time, the discipline protocols and procedures we think is one that's urgent work for us as well. Just from the standpoint, we know that we've talked about that for a period of time, and we think that's work we could also continue on this year. So unless there's further conversation around that ombudsman person role or, a desire of the board for us to slow down on that, I would ask Amy to maybe move into the kind of that next group of items.
I wouldn't, I'm not suggesting slowing down, but I wonder, Matt, if you might give the chair of the equity committee a call at least, and just so the committee knows, why we're doing what we're doing.
Sure, I think that makes sense, Charlie, and I understand where your concern comes from. And Laura and I actually had a conversation this week a little bit about it too, and so we'd be happy to circle back to the equity committee in that regard to let them know about the long-term goal and then what we see the role of how this role fits in. So for sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Matt, do you want me to teach?
Where does this role report? I'm sorry if I missed that.
Janet, I didn't. I didn't mention that, so you didn't miss that, and that's a good question. When you look at an ombudsperson, it really is designed to report outside of the current structure that addresses student or staff concerns, and so it would be a direct report to the superintendent's office. It wouldn't come up through HR and then through me, or up through the teaching and learning side. It would kind of be out on its own office that would report into the superintendent.
Yeah, the independence is really important, and so
Yes.
that structure that you're describing helps with that. Yeah, thank you.
Matt, do you want me to touch
I
on?
think you're going to say jump in about the standard maybe before Amy talks about those other two components, which I think that's fine.
Okay, so the other update I have is on the evaluation standard that we've talked about, and the adding of a standard around equity and culturally responsive teaching. We've talked primarily about teachers, but we believe that such a standard is appropriate for all of our evaluation models. The update I have for you this evening is that we plan to work on that and appreciate Brady's collaboration on this so far and over the next several months to develop that standard and then for the evaluation process for the 21-22 school year. This is critically important, and we want to make sure that we do it right. And so we want to take time to develop the standard the right way, and then also provide the needed professional development to evaluators on what the look-fors are in that standard. And we also think this is a great opportunity. I think I've heard JP say this before, is that if we do this right, we'll also be able to open the lens of evaluators in terms of reading equity and cultural responsiveness into all of our standards, right? That it's not just one piece of the evaluation, that this should flow through everything we do. And we've heard a lot of people talk about that. Laura Gray's talked about it, Matt, Jeremy have talked about that. It's not just one office that does this work. And so we hope that by taking the time to develop the standard the right way, to get input, to get feedback, and then provide the professional development around this evaluation piece, that it sets us up for long-term success. And so this is a time of year that we're talking to our principals and our buildings about the evaluation cycle for this year. And so we wanted to give the board an update to know that you would not see that, or that buildings will not see that as a new standard this year, that it's something we're going to develop over the course of this year for implementation in 21-22. Okay, that's all I have now, Amy. So I'll turn it over to you.
Chase, is developing the standard, I mean, you talked about it being important for all types of evaluate. Is the standard written differently depending on the employee group that it's being added to?
I don't want to say absolutely one way or the other, Sean, but more than likely it will probably be adjusted based on the employee group. And so it won't just be one, it'll have the same themes and same concepts, but it can look different in an evaluation. And calling it, I use the words just developing the standard, that shortchanges the work that needs to go into this, because then there's a whole set of criteria that would come under that. And so that next level, so we can drill down deeper on the concepts that this embodies. But the short answer to your question is it will probably look different, but encapsulate the same themes in the evaluations.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good evening again, everyone. I'm going to take the next three topics, the DPP, curriculum review, and then professional development, and tie the toolkit that Matt was talking about into that as well. So with the DPP, we have had some conversation with Dr. Sarah Brook, former professor at the University of Iowa, who's helped lead the work around the equity project that we worked in collaboration with them the last 5 years. Sarah was also integral to our work when we updated the latest DEI plan. And as we were having that conversation, we plan to convene a group of stakeholders and really look at it from 3 different angles. We want to do a deep dive in our data, looking at both our office referral data as well as our suspension data, look at the language that currently exists and do an audit of that, and then bring in the addition of restorative practices into that manual. And then as far as curriculum review and resource acquisition, we have rearranged or reordered the subject areas that we intended to do this year. And we're going to put social studies in their front and center. Typically, we would operate under a 3-year timeline. So we would plan for a review, we would conduct the review, and then we would select materials over a 3-year period. And we're actively working to condense that timeline as much as possible and plan to pull that committee together in the next few weeks. And then as far as professional development, we kicked off this year with the beginning of the year, a week back, the first week back with staff, where we engage into discussions, professional development around racial trauma and culturally responsive instruction. And then that was followed up by Dr. Anthony Muhammad, who works for Solution Tree and spoke to our staff about overcoming the achievement gap trap. We have also, as part of our ICCSD trainings this year, included a training around implicit bias and cultural responsiveness. And then we are planning for continued monthly Wednesday professional development sessions throughout the course of this year. So I'm going to let Laura talk a little bit about what those topics are, and then also share a little bit about the idea around the toolkit, which is really an effort to help our staff with their lesson design around topics that are more controversial or hard topics. And so that in utilizing this tool, our teachers would gain some confidence around planning for that lesson. So I'll ask Laura to add a few words.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, Drami. Nice to meet you. Okay, so what we're doing is having culturally responsive teaching as a theme this year. So you've heard it a few different times. And our Iowa teaching standards definitely support culturally responsive teaching. So this is just a reinforcement of that. And so the professional development that we have coming up will be mandatory for elementary and secondary teachers. They'll have 2 different time slots to come on, and then they'll get learning, and then we'll have people available to kind of like process through with them. And this year, I plan to utilize our cultural proficiency team. That's a group of our leaders who were selected through an application process through the TLC grant. In years past, they would just work with their buildings, but because we're here and a lot of the learning or big meetings we're going to do are going to be online or remote, we're just going to work together to help the district with some of these topics. So then teachers will see cultural proficiency team members kind of leading breakout rooms during the processing portion. And that's really the plan. So we're going to cover things from cultural proficiency, culturally responsive teaching, implicit bias, microaggressions. We're going to talk about enacting white supremacy culture, things like that, that anybody can kind of get in the weeds with, in efforts to help make sure that our staff feels confident to not get in the weeds. And so that kind of goes to the toolkit idea that when teachers teach slavery or race relations or something that might be controversial or potentially harmful to some, that they can kind of vet it first with a kind of checklist. And I found some really neat resources, one of them around specifically teaching slavery do's and don'ts, but our team can kind of pull more. So that's one step that they can do themselves. And then also hoping to utilize some of the cultural proficiency team members who are vets, because we have some vets on the team who've been around a while. They kind of know me and I can work with them to get this done, that they can submit their units or their lessons to their peers to kind of give it an overview and run it through a culturally responsive checklist that way. And so then they're getting feedback twice, possibly, like one themselves and through their peers. The other piece that I really hope to help roll out is this idea about genuine apologies around when we make missteps, because it will happen. Like any of us are susceptible to a microaggression here or there, even when we deliberately try not to, right? So there's this idea that you know, we all have to do better and work at this and purpose to do better. And so when you make a misstep, a genuine apology and you know, determination not to do it again is really the key. So I really want to wrap around some people and how to do that.
So thank you, Laura. I think from there, if you guys had any questions, we'd be happy to take them. Or I think the piece I would just like us to continue to work on as a group is that we continue this to be front and center. We also have some work around the diversity, equity, inclusion plan from when we put those initial kind of action steps out. You saw how those were related to different pieces, and you've heard me say before that if we don't improve culture in this area, the other things are all going to have diminishing returns. And so a lot of the work that we take on, I do think in this regard that we talked about tonight has a chance to change culture, and that we all have to also bear the responsibility for owning that culture, and that we have to be a part of that change too. And so we're excited about those pieces. I think that has to be our fundamental core value as we approach this work, and that we have to stay committed to it moving forward. So we'll continue to ask you guys to calendar the agenda item and provide updates and bring back those key focus areas of work.
So thanks, Matt. I just want to say for me personally, this has been a really moving presentation as a part of this board meeting. I did have one question that's probably kind of a technical thing. The equity committee is wanted to have the DPP plan made available so it's publicly accessible, or at least accessible to members of the equity committee for some time now. And I know that came up in our last meeting, and frankly, I can't remember exactly what the response was or where we are in getting that done, or if it's possible to get it done.
Yes is the easy answer, Charlie. So I know I was corresponding with Jane a little bit, and I think I'm one that failed to return the last email. So I'll follow up with Jane, the chair of the committee there, and make sure we get that. She was asking about process, and so I wasn't ready to answer a process question yet. We have that now, and we shared that with you guys this evening, and so we'll be happy to follow up and connect with her about what the next steps are there. So, yep.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks. And it's a great presentation tonight.
We got a lot of work to do, but we'll keep it moving forward.
Yeah, I'll echo that too, Charlie. I'm a little wondering also technically how, what's the timeline of getting through all of our staff with some of that PD?
So it will span throughout the year. So for example, it's almost monthly except for 2 of the months where it's shortened. And it would be a inconvenience to pull the teachers during that time frame, like November and then March when we have spring break. So other than that, it's monthly. And the expectation is that they're there. And there'll be other opportunities as well, like, you know, our IDS will be spreading out, you know, some of the same message through, you know, and interacting with teachers on a regular basis. So we're hitting this from all angles.
One more question, and this I know I'm sure doesn't have a good or easy answer, but you know, we've got PD for teachers. You know, what about the rest of our staff? Looking at the other groups, you know, because a lot of the stories that we've heard, you know, they don't all involve teachers. You know, sometimes it involves other folks that are interacting with students and families.
Sure. So I think one thing when you asked the first question, JP, I thought about with the time frame is also to think about what's training and then what's professional development. And so a piece where Amy, when she was mentioning walking through there, a couple of training components that all staff would have been asked to complete from their trainings on the onset of the year. So all staff would have been exposed to that. And our other challenge sometimes with support staff is the general turnover and the capacity building that some of this work requires, right? And that's some long-term development that it takes for us as professionals to do. And so that's a constant question we're asking internally too about what the best way to deliver that PD is when they have limited amount of hours that we can do that. So we thought, you know, from the onset here, the thing we knew we could get to everybody was the training component. And then as we continue to look and plan for those professional development opportunities, we know that equity needs to be a portion of that work as well in there. So if team members have anything they'd want to add on to that, but that was an initial thought for me to make sure that there's a piece that has touched all of our employees for sure.
And I guess one of the last oddball questions, maybe, as you know, we received a number in the last several weeks. We've received a number of email messages about the book Stamp, or that's not the full title, but
Charlie, I almost forgot to talk about it. I can't believe it. So thank you for reminding me. So I actually have a book for all of the board members. And so I'd like, I haven't asked Kim this yet, but we'll have those at Kim's desk out here at ESC. And so we'd like you guys to pick it up and be able to peruse it too. And so we are using that resource in our ethnic studies and AP US history class this year. And the other component of the work this year is that we're working towards incorporation of that for the 21-22 school year. We had a lot of different teachers that wanted to use it, and we definitely want to get that resource into the hands of our teachers and for our students to be able to use that. But we also know that it deals with very difficult concepts, and that if we're going to incorporate it into our class, then we need all teachers being prepared and ready to use that. And so that takes some planful efforts on our part. And that's what we'll be spending the year doing, is trying to assess where that goes and where it fits best. Is it language arts? Is it social studies? What level of social studies could it be? And so there'd be some work we take on this year to do that internally so that when we do adopt it, we have a planful approach and that people have been trained appropriate how to use it. But since we have had so much conversation and question about it, I did ask Christy Harper, our library coordinator, to pull some copies for you guys. And so I will actually leave those on Kim's desk when I walk out tonight, and you guys can feel free to stop anytime this week and pick one up or next and work your way through it so that we've all have a consistent understanding of what's in it or what's not in it.
If I don't stop by, I've already got a copy, so.
Okay,
thanks.
Great.
so thanks very much for taking that approach, Matt.
You bet. I think that's it for the equity update, Sean.
All right. We'll come back to that when we get to agenda setting, as Matt kind of alluded to. But for now, we'll move on to our public use of facilities policy. I think we're kind of getting an update of kind of current state, or at least what current state looked like prior to COVID, or maybe including COVID. I don't know who's taking that over. Chase?
That's going to be me, Sean. So again, good evening, and I'll switch hats now. We'll talk a little bit of facilities, and I will start with an apology to Rathina. I know how much she loves the P&G committee, and my presentation won't reflect any of the new updates in the P&G policies. It is, as Sean mentioned, how it stands. And I don't have a presentation as much tonight as really, I think, just an awareness piece of walking through what already exists on our public facing webpage and where individuals can go and kind of work through that. Kristen's done a nice job of setting this information out for people to get to. And so if you go to our homepage and you click on the community tab, which I've already done, and then you click on facility use, you'll come to this landing page. And it walks through kind of just an overview of our facility use. It has a link to a form that you fill out if you want to, if you want to request use. And then at the bottom in red, just above the building contacts, it highlights our 28E agreements that we have some of our municipalities. We have great partners throughout our local communities, and these reflect that partnership in building some of our actual structures and agreements that we've entered into with them for use of some of our facilities. And so I'm not going to really focus on those agreements, but I do want to point out to the board that those are there, and there are rules specific to governing facilities use that are related to our 28E agreements. While some of them have very standard language in them, there are also some specifics in those agreements regarding which spaces are subject to the 28E and how we go about sharing responsibilities under those agreements for certain spaces. But in general, if a member of the public is looking to use our buildings, we have a community use tab. And what comes up here is our policy. And I've actually opened it up in a different window. Is everybody still with me? Did that make that switch over to that new one? Okay. So this goes through kind of our guide for how a community member would determine if they were eligible to use a building and then what category it would fall into. And we've made some distinctions in terms of our community partners, and we've leveled them into 3 groups. And this impacts the cost that they have to bear if they use our property. And so we have 3 tiers. The first one, and then one kind of off to the side, is our nonprofit school partner. And so these are what we would call some of our high-level partner organizations outside in our community. You see the 28 E's mentioned there, but also student groups, other school-related groups, such as our PTAs, our PTOs, booster clubs, other nonprofits that have a connection to what we're doing instructionally or supporting our students. So Big Brothers Big Sisters would be an example that would fit into this group. And we don't list them out specifically, every one of these potential groups or partners by name, but we do set the criteria for this top tier of community uses. And these individuals do not have to pay a building fee for use of our spaces. And so you see that right here at the bottom. No building fee will be charged for nonprofit school partners, but we do, and this is true for any use of our space, if we have to have employees stay late, or if there's additional cleanup, we do charge for that. But if this level of community partner wants to use our building while we have staff there and there is no additional cleanup, there's no fee for these individuals. And I'll refer to the fee schedule here in a couple of minutes. The second tier are nonprofit groups or organizations. I won't go through, defining what a nonprofit group is, but we do separate those that we would consider nonprofit partners with general nonprofits out in the community. They have to fill out an application, and there is a fee structure for them specific to nonprofits, as opposed to our for-profit groups or organizations or companies that are looking to use our buildings. They again have to fill out an application, and there's a fee structure associated with their use of our properties as well. Of course, all of these organizations, and no matter where you rank in this list, you have to abide by our policies, our non-discrimination policies, and other administrative guidelines that we have for our use of anybody in our school community. And then the fourth group, this is kind of that one out on the side, or other governmental agencies. There are no costs for use here. We kind of, in that group, also include things like when we run elections, right? We're required by law to make our buildings available for elections, but along the lines of our elections, we also have caucuses here as well. We believe that's part of our duty as a good partner to the community to have those. And so they would fall into that other governmental agency group. I know I'm talking pretty quickly. I'm trying to be conscious of our time, but before I go and kind of look at the fee structure, questions about our groups and how we have these tiered right now. The other piece I would
so Chase, sorry for just a second. So would a parent group that wants to use the building for tutoring for their kids on kind of an ongoing basis, is there a place for that kind of a group to fit within this structure?
Yes, Charlie, and it would depend kind of, we'd have to know a little bit more about the group. Was it just provide, tutoring free of charge as a support service, as opposed to, is this a side business that some people have?
No, still this is free of charge.
So yeah, so it could. Now, one of the things for a group, and that's actually a really good segue into this next point, is that any group that wants to use our facilities has to have a certificate of insurance before we would let them use that. And so that might be a limitation for a group like that, Charlie, if it's just some people that are getting together and want to do that we do require that piece as something, just as a liability. It's something that we have to abide by our own insurance policies, and one of the requirements that we have. And so even groups that we don't charge, they do have to have that certificate of insurance available.
Sure. Okay.
So,
Sorry, what about a parent group that's working with their PTO? Do they fall under that first category?
They would, Lisa. I mean, if they're working with the PTO, PTA, we would include them here under C in that group as other school-related groups. And we try to be a good community partner, and so we're not looking to unreasonably exclude groups from our buildings or not to allow them to be treated as community spaces. And so back to Charlie's example, if a group came to us and wanted to do that, we would try to work with them on a way of, okay, what is the best path forward? What group do you fit into? And if they're like, oh, we're unassociated, we might do, Lisa, what you just said. We might say, or what you maybe kind of alluded to is, well, why don't you connect with the PTA and see if you can partner with them because of their standing in this category? And so we would work with people to try to do that. Again, we recognize the role that the school district plays in the overall community fabric, and that we want people to be able to access it and use it for reasons that help support the community good. I mentioned a fee structure associated with that, and this document kind of goes over that. It's also accessible from the site, and I won't, just for an example to show you, we have the different groups we talked about: nonprofit, school partner, nonprofit organizations, other governmental agencies, and then for-profit groups. And so we do tier these out, and then the cost associated breakdown. We want to be transparent too. We don't want to let a group use our property and then at the end come and say, oh, and by the way, you owe us X amount of dollars. We want to make sure that we're upfront about that when people sign up. And so this information as well is available on the website. So going back, there you see it. It's down one, the fee schedule, and then some additional rules for club use of our district facilities. One of the things to point out before I kind of stop and just open up for questions is that we do treat our outdoor spaces different than our indoor spaces. We don't do a lot of, or really, unless before I say something absolute, you might have to help me out here, reserving of outdoor spaces like we do indoor spaces. If you want to use the tennis court and there's not a tennis tournament going on, that's more of a first come, first serve basis. A couple of our 28Es do talk about collaborative agreements for some of our baseball fields, for some of the Little League baseball teams in town. But for the most part, our outdoor spaces are first come, first serve, whereas you have to reserve space for any of our indoor spaces. And while we do want to be a good community partner, obviously the activities or programs of the school district do take precedent. And so if we have something set up, or there's a baseball game, or there's a basketball game, that would take precedent over somebody using either that outside field or our gym for a different event. And so we do reserve that right. The last thing, I said I was going to stop, but I'm going to mention one more thing, and Sean reminded me of it. He said pre-COVID or now COVID, and the difference is with our guidance right now, we have closed the buildings to community use. And that's tough for us. I just mentioned that we like to be a good community partner and be part of the overall scope of our community environments. But as we balance health and safety, we felt like that in order for us to ensure that our buildings were as clean and as safe as possible for our students and staff that are now going to be in there on a regular basis, we had to say no to some situations. And our 28Es continue to be in place, and so we're continuing to work with those partners. And so we've obviously made some exceptions, BASP being one of those, because we also see the need for childcare in our communities. And so while it's not resolute, and we have made some exceptions, the guidance that we have been giving to principals and to external organizations is, for right now, we are not using or allowing widespread community use of our buildings during the COVID-19 pandemic. And with that, now I will answer any questions that the board might have.
Yeah, I had a question. So our outdoor facilities, and are they unlocked and available for use all of the time?
Generally speaking, yes, JP. I was going to say yes until you said all of the time. Back in the spring, we did lock all of our facilities when there was a lot less known about COVID, and we really tried to work closely with the municipalities on what their takes were. I mean, if you remember, we even closed our playgrounds at one point. Jeff and Dwayne and the team and Ben Grimm did a nice job of going out and trying to fence off those spaces. We've relaxed that, and we've relaxed the use of outdoor spaces like our fields and our tennis courts. We still do have signage up that let the community know that we are not sanitizing or disinfecting the playground equipment on a daily or hourly basis, and so they're using that somewhat at their own risk. Scott, you might have to help me a little bit on if some of our competition facilities that are outdoor are locked, to get kind of at JP's question. There might be some fields, JP, that are locked, but for the most part, we are not currently preventing general access to tennis courts, tracks, green spaces, and playgrounds.
Yeah, I would say that it depends on the facility, but some of them are locked, and we don't rent those competition spaces. Chase, like we don't rent a baseball diamond or stuff like that.
I think the way that our complex is set up at Liberty, some of those fields might be locked. Isn't that correct, Scott?
Yep. The soccer field at West High probably isn't, because it's open on that south side. So it just depends. City's turf field is pretty easy to get to as well. So it depends.
I guess I was thinking less for rentals and more for, people who want to use the track or the playgrounds or some of that just general public use where they're just going to show up and it's not in use and they would use it in that instance. Tennis courts.
Yep, the tracks are open. I think universally they're open.
The tennis courts are open too.
Okay. If you have other questions or things come to mind, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to provide you any additional information. Or if folks reach out to you, don't hesitate to send them to my direction, and I'll help them work through that process. So Matt or Sean, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Any last minute questions on this topic from directors? All right, let's move on. Our next topic is the UEN Steering Committee, and I'm going to throw it out there just because we talked about as we kind of get ready for like the different fall meetings and whatnot, we tend to find folks to participate in these different groups. I believe JP is currently our representative on the steering committee, and I think we just got an email that the next meeting is, I don't know, Thursday or Friday of this week or something like that. So it's fairly quickly. So I'm going to assume that JP is planning on attending that. But as we kind of move into the next year, I think they have a fairly large meeting early November, kind of coinciding with IASB's work, which was our next agenda item. So we want to make sure that we have a delegate picked for that, or a representative picked for that. I don't know, JP, if you are interested in continuing doing it, or if you would like to be done, or if anybody else has any strong feelings like they want to kick you off and take your spot. I just throw that out there. I just want to make sure that as we kind of go past this week and the next meeting, we have somebody selected for the rest of them, or at least for the next year. So I'll throw that out there.
If somebody has a strong feeling they want to kick me off, I would welcome that, certainly. The other thing to think about with this is the next topic, which is the IASB delegate, which was Paul. And so I'm not interested in doing both of those things. I think that's a bit of extra work, but I don't mind being on the UEN steering committee at all. I think it's maybe 2 meetings a year, maybe more if something's going on. I want to say we met God, I'm trying to remember now, but I thought the last time was last fall, prior to the IASB convention. So it's not a ton of work. I think one thing I really benefited from was understanding the UEN and understanding that there are these other districts who have very similar concerns to what we're working on as far as equity goes, as far as disproportionality goes, that that we're all kind of in this together in that work in the urban districts in the state. So it's really interesting work. It's a good group of people. I don't know, Matt, how it goes, but the way the steering committee works is it's a rotation. So each district provides a certain member who has a certain role, and sometimes that's a board member and sometimes that's a superintendent. And so right now we're in the board member stage for I don't know how many years. So that's a little background info on it. And if folks are interested, I do think it's a healthy perspective to have, a statewide perspective. And so if anybody wants to take that on, I mean, I'd be happy to relinquish that, or I can keep going too.
I vote that you keep going, JP.
I am perfectly willing to let you continue to do it, JP. So are any other board members really chomping at the bit?
Well, I think
here in a second.
I think JP has just done a fantastic job. He's great for this, well suited for it, you know, represents the district very well.
Agreed.
Okay, well, I'll get to hang out with my buddy Tom Ahert, since we're both originally from Crawford County. So there you go. Thank you for your vote of confidence.
All right, so we will have JP go another year. So the next up is the ISB delegate, and as JP correctly mentioned, it was Paul. It kind of cycles through. There's basically one delegate assembly meeting. It looks like it's November 17th. I don't know that there's a whole lot of responsibility outside of that, as far as I know. So I would throw that out there and see if anybody's interested in doing that. It's very obviously unique year that it's a virtual meeting. Usually it's coinciding in person with the ISB annual convention. So I don't know that it's
I can do it, Sean.
one virtual meeting.
I'm fine with doing it if nobody else has strong opinions about it.
Well, I'm going to arm you for it, so I would gladly let you do it.
I have a strong opinion that you should do it, Ruthina.
I support that.
All right, we're all really good at volunteering other people.
Yes, we are.
All right, so we will have Ruthina down there for that. Thank you, Ruthina, and thank you, JP, for taking on some additional responsibility. And we can move down to our one action item. I'm going to throw that to Matt to lead us off, and I assume some other folks may take part in this as well.
So yeah, thank you, Sean. So our last item here, the action item, is around the climate action proposal that your consultant contract that you have in front of you. You remember this work started last year, and we did some initial work with you and I, and now we're on to the next phase of that work. And so excited, and this is another urgent part of our work, that as we get through some of the return to learn and try to adapt to COVID here a little bit and what that's going to be. We know these are other important parts of the work that we have to continue moving on as well. And so tonight we have, I guess I'll turn it to Chase first. I think Dwayne's going to do some of the talking on this one in the presentation of it, but I'll flip it to Chase first.
Thanks, Matt. And I'll be brief as I introduce this for Dwayne. And if you remember, almost a year ago in December, we had a presentation from some partners at UNI, and they kind of gave us really almost a needs assessment, and that might oversimplify it, but they kind of laid out some benchmarks of where we were in terms of our carbon footprint, our greenhouse gas emissions, and how we stack up about those emissions and our carbon footprint right now as we compare it to goals in the next few years and even long term. And what that did is provide us a baseline and saying, okay, here are some areas of concern. They highlighted where our carbon footprint was the largest and where we could make the most gains. And the directive from the board was to for us to come back and develop a plan about how we were going to put into action the information that we learned. And as Matt said, the spring we ran into somewhat of a hiccup with COVID, and so this was kind of pushed a little bit to the back as we prioritized our work around that. But over the summer, it has come back into scope, into our focus, and is a priority. And so tonight, what Dwayne's going to talk to you about is our next step on down the path of going even more green in the district. And we believe this builds on the work that was already done. It's not a duplicate of what was done. It's taking what we know and having somebody help us create these into action items that then Dwayne and Jeff and the rest of the team will execute with fidelity. And so with that, I will turn it over to Dwayne to talk about some exciting information we have to share.
All right, well, thank you. I'm pleased to provide our recommendation for our climate change consultant. Excuse me. But before I do that, I'd like to congratulate Ben Grimm. Ben is our grounds lead and has taken on a lot of other roles. And you may recall the work that he's done with the playgrounds and the DOJ and integrated pest management. He's done a lot of things. He wears a lot of hats. But just recently, Ben was nominated and elected to the City of Iowa City Climate Commission. So we now have an official seat on that commission, and congratulations to Ben. I know he's listening tonight, and that we're all grateful that he's willing to take that on as an extra duty. And I couldn't think of a better person to do it. Ben's really into green and likes to do things the right way, and is very detailed, as you all know, through the playground studies that he did for you. And so congratulations to Ben. Also with us this evening and is listening in and can answer questions if we need to is Dwight Schrum. And Dwight is a mechanical engineer with Design Engineers. He's the managing principal partner of the company. And Design Engineers, since I've been here in the last 8 years, has done many, many projects for the district. And I'll come back to that in just a second. But you may recall the last discussion we had was with Attorney Holland. And we had a lot of inquiries from different solar companies and different people that wanted to do business with the district. And there was just a lot of proposals. And that, as a result of that conversation with Attorney Holland, we decided the best course of action was to find a consultant to help the district navigate through the climate action change plan and some of the recommendations. After that meeting, we did do a search. We found a lot of consultants on the East Coast, the West Coast, and the Sun Belt. But one of the best consultants in the country is right here in our own backyard. And that's Design Engineers in Cedar Rapids. And when I compared their qualifications, I'd put them up against anybody in the country. And it really pleased me because we've done so much business with Design Engineers over the years that we're very comfortable with them. They're very professional. And you have in your attachments this evening their qualifications. And I think if you read through it, you'll be impressed by some of the projects that they've done. And I feel good that they will be able to help us navigate all the different issues with the climate action plan. Their experience includes they built or designed and built the first Iowa certified zero energy building in the state of Iowa. Now, that's a mouthful, but it's a building that uses geothermal, that uses reduced energy consumption and recycles materials, and it just a whole bunch of criteria that go together to create a building that you can truly call net zero. And that happens to be their office building in Cedar Rapids. And there's a pretty good description of what a net zero building is in their qualification statement this evening, and some documentation on what the building does. And I think if you get the time to read that, I've been around energy for a long time and done a lot of energy related projects, and I'm not going to get into all that, but I was impressed. So I think that they've shown their commitment to energy. They've got a gold certified LEED building that actually exceeded the standards. They were awarded extra points above and beyond what's required for a gold building. So they know what it takes. And I'll just throw a little piece in there. If you know Dwight at all, his own home is just north of Iowa City, north of the interstate. And he lives in a building that is completely self-sustainable as well. And so he's not only, he not only practices it, he lives it. And so he's got a pretty good example of his own home that you can look at if you choose to. And my phone's ringing. Bad timing. Trying to sell the house, and that's the realtor, but I'll call him back. Anyway, so they've also done numerous other LEED buildings and solar projects. And have they done these studies, which is a fair question. You know, they're going to do a study for us. They did a renewable energy study for Kirkwood Community College. So they have had experiences in helping clients with big projects. It's not just a one-on-one type building, but with a wealth of projects spread out over time. So the proposal that we've asked design engineers to put together for you to consider would be done over the next 3 to 5 months. And that plan will help us reduce our carbon footprint, or it would increase our use of renewable energy. We're going to conduct an inventory baseline of all our greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to study the photovoltaic, which is the solar, feasibility. And you may recall that we did a study late last year on the roofs of all the buildings to see where it was feasible and where it wasn't. So we've got that head start. They're going to study the energy efficiency of our buildings, which we've done. Many of you are familiar. We've done quite a few programs with Mid-American Energy and Alliant Energy in reducing our building consumption, energy consumption, and we exceed the building code in most cases by at least 20%. And we've already garnered over $2 million in rebates from the utility companies for our energy efficiency endeavors. So we're well down that road, but we're gonna study that and see if we can do a little better. We're gonna see what it takes to convert all our natural gas equipment to electrical. And in that regard, we can use renewable energy to reduce our carbon footprint as well. We're going to study what it takes to convert our district buses and vehicles to electric. Now, that's not something we're going to be able to accomplish overnight, but as part of this, we're going to put together a plan that lays out the capital cost, because there is some cost to do this, and a timeline to get it done. You know, just like we did with the facility master plan, we're gonna lay out a plan for these improvements and the costs, and when we think we can afford to do that, and how long it will take for your consideration. So you're going to hear a lot more about those pieces and how we're going to hope to accomplish that. I think design engineers is the right choice. They're going to help us do this for a very minimal fee. I think of $45,000. When you compare that to some of the design work that we've done, it's very fair, plus reimbursables. So with that, I am being brief and would answer any questions that you may have, or if we need to get Dwight online, we can do that as well.
So Dwayne, you mentioned the 45,000 plus reimbursables. Do we have an amount? Would that come before us every time, or would that just show up in the monthly bills?
Well, Ruthie, that's a great question. It'd probably show up in the monthly bills, and typically that reimbursables would be, if we have some blueprint costs or some printing costs, or if we have some things like that. And we do that every month with our architects and design firms, so it's not out of the ordinary. And I monitor that pretty close.
Dwayne, so this is Charlie. Thanks for including the design engineers. The brochure it really helps to understand their background and what they work in. What do you think about their background in doing the bus and vehicle conversion to electric? I didn't see them having that is part of what they said they do very well, but I may
Yeah.
be just misunderstanding.
Well, no, that's a reasonable question, and what I can tell you is that when it comes to designing the infrastructure or figuring out what the actual cost of to build what it takes to support the buses, I have no doubts whatsoever that they're capable of doing that. If we need to hire an additional consultant to help us, and this would be the one area that we may need with the buses from electric to, or from gas to electric, we would then consider a sub-consultant, at which point I would bring that back to you and make that recommendation if I think we need to do that.
The other piece on our buses specifically, Charlie, is that with Iowa Central being a vendor, obviously, and us not owning the buses, we would want to work with them. And we've started to explore conversations with them about the research they've done and as they watch trends around the nation as well. And so we might have some bus folks listening tonight. So I want to make sure that we do acknowledge that that's something that we would do in partnership with them as our transportation vendor.
And I would compare it to when we design a school, like when we designed Liberty or even City High, we ended up hiring a consultant, food service consultant, to help us with the kitchen equipment and the kitchen. And it's not unlike that. So if we need to dig a little deeper and get a different expert, we'll do that. But I'll certainly bring that back to you first.
Okay, thanks very much. It helps.
So Dwayne, the way you've been describing and comparing it to a lot of other facilities designs and updates. So my question is then, does it follow the same funding source, or is this general funds dollars, or is this going to fit in with PEPL or SAVE or whatever other dollars we have?
Actually, all this work, my understanding, and Les can correct me if he needs to, would qualify as a capital or infrastructure fund expenditure. So Pebble can be used to pay for the plan work. The actual structures could be paid out of sales tax or Pebble or general obligation bond. Any fund that's used for infrastructure, we would not use general fund dollars to do this work. The benefit, though, is to the general fund, and I've said this for many years and many times, that when you can leverage infrastructure funds such as Pebble or sales tax to help you with your expenditures in the general fund, which this will do, it'll lower our utility costs. It's a benefit to everybody. It's a win-win for the district. It's a win-win for teachers, students, and that's how we'd approach it.
I was hoping that was the answer for just that reason. I know that, the general fund dollars are going to be pretty tight this year, the next several years, right? So I think this is a huge step in the right direction. And I was, before, I listened to you talk, I was concerned with, how is this different than what we already did with you and I coming in? And I think just kind of hearing it and reading through the document a little bit with the project, I get that it's kind of those next necessary steps, the tangible steps, right? As opposed to, you need to fix all these things and it'll be better, right? It's drilling down to the details. So
right. And it's a complement to facility master plan. That's what I would compare it to. We had the idea if we need to fix the buildings, but how do you do it? So this is a blueprint, and how do you do it?
Yep, I really appreciate that. Anybody else? Questions?
I just want to chime in, Dwayne, and say thank you for finding a qualified company that's local, and we can keep our dollars here locally. I've said that before, that's really important to me, that we do that when we can. And so kudos to you. I'm thrilled to see this group.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And they're truly our experts in their field. I'm just so pleased that we could get them on board.
Just to follow up real quickly, directors, on Dwayne's comments, the cost related to this, that's all facilities, is definitely PEPL or capital projects, and will benefit the general fund with the savings. The portion that might be related to buses and the fleets may have to come from the general fund. We would want to do a little bit more research from that, because transportation is typically a general fund expenditure only.
But the infrastructure could be paid for. Correct, Les? The infrastructure is not a problem to support the buses. guess he can't hear me.
I think you're right, Dwayne.
Yeah.
It's actual transportation. Any other questions for these guys? Sean?
Is there any more you guys had to offer, Matt or team?
I think that was the overview. So,
Are you looking for a motion, Sean?
Yep. If there's no further discussion, I think I need to entertain a motion for this contract.
I move that we approve the Climate Action Plan consultant contract.
Second.
Wow, there was like a second through a sixth there. You can pick your favorite.
Take your choice.
But I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, I think that's an important step. So I'm glad we've done that. So now we can move into agenda setting, and I'm gonna just some general thoughts before we get into the specifics. One of the things we talked about, Ruthina, Matt, and I, as we kind of worked on our own agenda setting, is trying to get back at least some semblance of what our meeting schedule was like. If you remember, last year we tried to make this change to have the first regular board meeting of each month be a discussion type meeting, and the second regular board meeting of the month being the action meeting. Obviously, as we've been meeting weekly, that whole thing has been sort of thrown out the window. I don't think we necessarily need to take away from the important things that we are doing weekly now, but I think we want to try and do that. So to that end, on the regular board meeting, I think we're going to add some discussion type items because it will be the first regular meeting in October. But one thing we did discuss for our next special meeting, we do have the benefit of having a 5 Tuesday September. Next Tuesday's meeting would only be 2 into the hybrid model. And we discussed the possibility, and I'll throw that out to you guys. I'll tell by happiness in faces. If we do not have a special meeting next Tuesday and actually put the special meeting on the 6th of October to have some time into the hybrid to really have a more fully pictured update on the return to learn. Board members, is that okay with you? Do you feel like we have to keep meeting weekly? I see a couple nodding heads. So if that's okay, if somebody's against it, speak up now, I guess. It's probably what
I was hoping we'd go to 2 meetings a week.
That'll be plan B.
Oh,
I like the idea because I don't think we'll know what's really going on too much with hybrid after only 2 days into it. And so at least this way we'll get a full week and 2 days for the team to come back and let us know what's going on.
Yeah.
And we can adjust that if the positivity rate is and really takes some movement in an unfavorable direction.
I think that's true. Our metrics say, right, as we hit different points, we can call a special meeting to discuss our next steps. So I think we can call one at any time, but I think for planning purposes, I think we can all have, I think might be our second Tuesday off in the last 6 months. So if we're okay with that, the agenda that's on there for the 29th, all that's on there is the return to learn. And so I would push that to October 6th. So then the next regular board meeting on the 13th, to kind of go back to the schedule, you'll see the student representative update is on there again, because it usually is the first regular board meeting of the month. But again, with having an extra week here, it's not like every 2 weeks, it's 3 weeks from now before they would have to come back. So I think that's a good thing. So we'll leave that on there. There's not a lot on the agenda currently, just sort of the regular consent stuff. One of the things that we've talked about, and Matt kind of mentioned it earlier, to sort of keep the conversation going around our equity steps. We talked about having a kind of a standing discussion item at that first meeting of each month as the discussion meeting around our equity items. So we throw that on there, and obviously we'd probably throw a return to learn update on there as well. I know, and I don't have the list right in front of me, there are a couple things that we pushed back to the second meeting in October. I think one of being the voluntary transfer policies, because we were going to discuss secondary, but I think we're also going to kind of look at the elementary as well in conjunction. So that might be one discussion later in October. Besides those things, is there anything directors would like to see on the 13th of October?
This isn't a new topic, but when we talk about equity in October, could we get an update on kind of the rollout of the LGBTQ policy?
Sure. Yep. We can definitely do that, JP.
Anything else from directors?
Sean, this isn't an agenda item, but to go back to the meeting that we're skipping, I did want to throw out, I think the Reynolds orders on bar closure expires on September 29th right now, and it's unclear if she's going to extend that or not. And so I think we should be, if it gets lifted on the 29th, and then on that, you know, we start seeing a lot of activity downtown, we may want to be open to having a meeting, be responsive to that before the 6th. And I'd be willing to do that, but I think we need to keep careful tabs on that situation.
Yeah, I think it's the 27th. I think it's this Sunday. It ends. It was extended 1 week for, you know, Johnson and Story counties, you know, just in time to get kids in school. I think it's kind of how it's playing out. I do think that it might be 2 weeks after that before we really see that impact, just because of the lag time from, you know, how this virus works. So we may not see a whole lot of numbers changing, but I think we can definitely keep an awareness of it. And if we have to call a special meeting, I think it's warranted, but we'll all cross our fingers that we can have a Tuesday off.
Yeah. Speaking of numbers, Sean, I'd like to ask Kristen, probably have to go through Matt, actually, I guess. We're publishing a positivity rate every day now on the COVID dashboard. I wonder if we could make those daily rates into a table so we can have some, start developing a history of those rates over time, so we can get an idea of, at least I personally feel more comfortable looking at those changes over time. And I'm too lazy.
Charlie, is that same concept we've talked about before, where that
Yeah.
table's kind of small on the COVID-19 dashboard from the state, and if we had something, maybe just create it on our own, pulling that data? Is that what you're talking about?
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a simple matter of putting the table together every day, which I'm too lazy to do myself, so I have to ask Kristen to do it. So.
Well, it's not an easy read on the COVID-19 Iowa site, so Kristen and I will work on that together and see what we can do. It might be good, you know, just a good data piece to have easily on our own COVID dashboard. So we'll work on
that. And since we're starting online schooling in a week, we may be able to get some idea of what kind of in-school transmission we experience.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we have reached the end of our agenda. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you everyone for your time. Team, you're doing great work. See you next time.
Good night, folks. Thank you.